think you made it your wedding.
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. I love my wife. I'm going to get in trouble for that, aren't I?
Yeah.
Good morning, Crime Spies. Good morning, good morning. Say, I was putting together a timeline while I had my morning audiobook playing, and I have some significant questions after the testimony today. I'll go over that after I confirm, but what I did is I put together, and I can't really show you here, but I put together a recap of today's witnesses. There will be Okay, so we're going to be watching the morning one from yesterday. There's going to be 5 witnesses. Christine Mandels, who is Becky's friend. She also did CrossFit with her. I think she lives like in California or something. Kelly Majewski. So the first one will be a friend. The rest of them will be from the Illinois State Police. Kelly is forensic scientist. Then there will be Jim Regan's forensic scientist. Then there will be Catherine Doolin, forensic scientist. And finally will be Vicki Reel's firearm ID expert for Illinois State Police. Then this afternoon's testimony, which the video is out for that as well, is just one testimony from Nick Eddy. He's a detective for the Quincy Police Department, and he's the one that I have the questions the most on. So he kind of lays a timeline. Like I said, we'll get to it, but I need to confirm in the tweets yesterday, and again, we're playing sort of a game of telephone here because I'm taking the tweets from Muddy Rivers News, I'm compiling them in order, and then trying to create a summary to give to you. I was doing the summaries after the trial was over, but then I was ending up having to do like 3 videos, and it was just kind of a waste of time. But as I was like looking at this, the only witness in the afternoon before the state then rests is this Nick Eddy detective. And he goes over this Whoop device. The Whoop device is like a fitness tracker, like a Fitbit kind of, is what I'm surmising, that he wears. It kind of looks like an Apple Watch, but it's called a Whoop. He says that on February 22nd, no, she was not. She was murdered on the morning of February 23rd. Then he said the device not connected to the phone from 12:36 to 2:01. Okay, so I think maybe I have the days mixed up. Anyway, my question is kind of, well, we'll get through the testimony and then I guess we'll go over my questions. How's that? Let's just do that, because I'm just going to confuse you, and I don't know, some of you anticipate the testimony and don't want me to like spoiler alert it. Also, trigger warning. I think most of this is like, what should I say? It's like device tracker information, video information. So I think most of the like autopsy things and such were yesterday, but I believe in the description box below there's a trigger warning. And actually, frankly, if I was thinking about it, if you're a true crime watcher, aren't you already kind of, why would you be a true crime fanatic if you weren't already aware that some of the stuff is really gross and disturbing? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. I don't have the camera on yet because I'm just out of the shower and I'm in my robe. And so got towels and whatnot. All right. So I'm going to start with this, and I'll get on camera as soon as I get my hair dry, but I'll be listening. I might have to air dry my hair today. You might have to deal with Crime Spies with wet hair. How's that? I have it set up in 1.25 speed. I have the closed captioning on. I think I have to fix the banners a little bit on my StreamYard because these banners are not supposed to cover the video, but somehow they do, especially that one. The little ticker on the bottom doesn't seem to, but I don't think anybody really reads the ticker. And yes, my back still hurts. It's better. It's better. It's getting better, knock on wood. So I think this whole resting thing, albeit boring, is working. So let's get started. This is morning testimony. There'll be 5 people. Then they'll break for lunch, and then we'll switch videos to the afternoon testimony. Meanwhile, the court is going to resume in about an hour and 15 minutes. So I think it's estimated that the state will present their case. I don't know. Here's another question I have. If the state doesn't present this Ted Johnson, the boyfriend, his testimony or his cell phone records, Fitbit, Apple Watch, etc., or vehicle information. Remember how in Murdaugh they had the car started, the window rolled down, he went east, he went west. They don't have his information. I would be really disappointed that the defense doesn't bring that up, because in my mind, it's just as I'm putting this timeline together as we get to the end, it just seems like he's kind of around at important times. Like, for example, the night of the 21st. Well, and then again, it's the 22nd/23rd. I don't know. I think they should get his stuff. Oh, I know why. Because the neighbor that had the surveillance on the house detected motion. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'll get it more easier for me to explain. All right, let's go. Let's roll.
The following is a presentation of Muddy River News.
We are on the record on 23 CF 170,
I'm gonna
People
fast
versus
forward this
Timothy
guy.
Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney.
He just
Casey
gives me the
Schnock. People are
snoozers.
present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And Mr. Jones, are the people ready to present evidence today?
We are, Your Honor. We have 5 witnesses for today, and then once those 5 witnesses, I think 5. Ms. Kate said 6, and we double checked. It's normally she's right and I'm wrong.
Okay. All right.
It's 6.
Okay. And defendant ready to proceed today, Ms. Schnock?
Yes, Your Honor.
And anything we need to discuss before we bring in the jury?
Judge, the only thing I have, there is a new exhibit with regard to one of our witnesses based on how the evidence was, we anticipated it coming in, and that changed, and now it's going to be People's Exhibit 243, which is text messages between Facebook messages between Becky Bliefnick and Christine Mendel.
Okay.
That's the first witness.
Shown this Commissioner and updated her exhibit list as well.
All right. And we will take care of that when that comes up, because that's another one where Ms. Schnock made a pretrial objection to, correct?
Correct.
All right. Anything else we need to discuss by the way of the defendants?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Then we will be in recess, and we will start promptly at 9 o'clock, and I'll admonish about cell phones again. We'll be in recess.
Oh, thank you, Judge. We look forward to that.
Along with his attorney, Ms. Casey Schnock. People are present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And then, ladies and gentlemen, you are allowed to have your cell phones in the courthouse. However, phone out, then you'll just
Okay, we got it, man.
Identify them as media and will not. Prosecution's case in chief, and Mr. Jones or Ms. Keck, do you have evidence for us today?
We do, Your Honor. The people would call Christine Mendel.
Okay, now Christine, I'll put it back on normal 1.25 speed instead of super duper 2 speed. She is Christine's friend.
If you'll
And-
come around here, please, and have a seat right here in this chair. And then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, ma'am, and then bend that microphone up so it's in front of you and speak towards the microphone.
So this is
please, okay?
Christine's
You
friend.
may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you tell us your name, please?
Christine Mandel.
Ms. Mendel.
Apparently she starts crying, so
Mandel.
prepare yourself.
Ms. Mendel, where do you currently live?
Laguna Hills, California.
Did you, before living in California, did you used to live here in Quincy?
I did.
While you lived here in Quincy, did you know somebody by the name of Becky Bliefnick?
Yes.
Can you tell us how you knew Becky?
I worked for her and with her at Q-Town CrossFit. It's now Q-Town Fitness in 2013, and we started a CrossFit Kids program together.
How long did you work with her?
A little under 2 years, I believe.
Did you also know Tim Bliefnick?
Yes.
And Tim was Becky's husband, is that right?
Yes.
After after you moved away from Quincy, did you and Becky still continue to stay in contact?
Yes.
Was one of the ways that you stayed in contact through Facebook?
Yes.
And specifically, would you talk over Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
When you would talk with Becky, were there things on her Facebook and when you talked to her that led you to believe it was Becky you were talking to?
Yes, of course.
Tell me things that you would see on her Facebook that you knew it was Becky.
She always posted pictures of her kids, her 3 boys, Deacon, Grayson, and Arlen, and she was a nurse, and she just was very prideful of being a mom.
Would she send you pictures of herself over Messenger showing how she was working out, how proud she was of herself?
Yes, she sent me a few messages because we had worked out together, and she had lost some weight and was really proud, and she knew I would be excited for her.
Did you guys have a conversation last March, specifically March 14th of 2022?
Yes.
And did that conversation occur over Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
Christine, I'm going to show you. We've marked these as People's Exhibit 243. Can you look at those and tell us what that is, please?
This was a conversation we had on Facebook.
And specifically, was that on that March 14th of 2022 date?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask that People's Exhibit 243 be admitted in public.
Ms. Schnock, objection?
I would renew my previous objection for the record, Your Honor, and have no additional objections.
All right.
For the record.
That objection was heard pre-trial. The court overruled the objection at that time. The court reconsiders its ruling and would overrule the objection at this time. And People's Exhibit 243 will be admitted and then may be published to the jury.
Ms. Mandel, up here at the top of the screen, this is where we can see that the conversation started March 14th, 2022 at 9:55 in the evening. Is that right?
Correct.
And during the course of that conversation, you asked Becky, these are your words in purple here, Becky, are you safe? Is that right?
Yes.
And the other messages we're going to see in black with the white background, those were messages Becky sent back to you.
Yes.
After you asked Becky, are you safe? Becky said to you, I told you your jaw would drop. Is that right?
Yes.
And then she continued, I feel safe right now. I'm super nervous for when this ends. If he doesn't get his mind, I feel he may literally lose his mind. Is that what she said to you?
He said if he doesn't get his way, I feel he may literally lose his mind. Yes.
Did she then continue and say later in the message, I also got a security system?
Yes.
After telling you that, did she say, he wants everything, wants sole custody of the kids, wants all the money, all the assets, wants me to suffer?
Yes.
Did your conversation continue that same late night of March 14th?
Yes.
As it continued, did she say, but I've had some serious PTSD with all this and the things I found out. Plus, I've had not one, but 2 coworkers get murdered by their exes in the last year, which has totally made me a nervous Nellie.
Yes.
Did she also continue, I'd rather let people believe what he tells him and stay alive for my kids. It sounds so crazy to say that out loud, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would go off the deep end.
Yes.
Did she also continue, he literally cares more about hurting me than anything else?
Yes.
Finally, did Becky Bliefnick tell you that night, I literally would never trust him to ever let him in my house if it was just us?
Yes.
Ms. Mandel, the person that you knew as Tim Bliefnick, do you see him here in court today?
Yes.
Can you tell us where he's sitting, what he's wearing, please?
He's sitting across from me in black.
Governor, if the record could reflect Ms. Mandel has identified the defendant.
The record will reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Thank you, ma'am. No other questions.
Questions, Ms. Schnock?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Mandel. So you met Becky in 2013, correct?
Yes.
And that was through Q-Town CrossFit?
Yes.
Did you also meet Tim in 2013?
Yes.
And that was also through Q-Town CrossFit?
Yes.
Did you coach with Becky?
Yes. I coach CrossFit kids.
Okay, and how long did you and Becky coach together?
Around 2 years.
Okay, and did you coach with Tim?
I worked for Tim.
Okay, and how long did you work for Tim?
Same amount of time.
Okay. When did you move to California?
2014, I believe.
Okay, so between
14 or 15, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So between 2013, when you met Tim and Becky, and the time that you moved to California, did you ever hang out with Becky socially outside of the gym?
Yes, we did events for well, it was mostly gym related, yes. And then we drove to, I believe, St. Louis for CrossFit Kids certification. So we spent the whole weekend together.
Okay. And did you ever hang out with Tim socially?
It was all gym related.
Okay, so your involvement with Tim and Becky outside of the gym was gym-related events?
Usually, or fundraisers.
Okay, that's fair. Were you ever a guest in their home?
I've been to their home 1 or 2 times before.
Okay, and were they ever a guest in your home?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. After you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain contact with Tim?
I had visited for a fundraiser event that I'm sure he was at. I don't remember having a lot of contact with him. It was usually Becky.
Okay. Do you remember the last time you would have seen Tim in person before today?
It would have been the fundraiser for Dancer Love Foundation if he was attending.
Okay, and do you know how long ago that was?
Maybe 4 years ago. I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, and in that time, you did not maintain frequent contact with Tim, correct?
No,
Okay.
I don't think we have talked since I've worked for him or any kind of fundraiser that Q-Town hosted if I came back for it.
Okay, and after you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain frequent contact with Becky?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. After you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain contact with Becky?
We talked on Facebook. We would say happy birthday to each other, like brief check-ins, just like anyone I was friends with at that gym.
Okay, and how often would you and her have contact?
We hadn't had to contact for a while. That conversation was maybe a year after the last like deep conversation that we had had.
Okay, thank you. So 2021, prior to March 14th of 2022, the last substantive conversation that you had with Becky would have been in 2021.
That would be my rough guess, other than just small talk, catching up about things that had gone on.
Sure. And then you and her had this message in March of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And at least in March of 2022, she was telling you that she felt safe at that time, correct? At least that's what it said in the message, correct?
She said she needed a security system and that she also was fearful that Tim would do something to hurt her. So safe can mean.
Ma'am, I'm just asking you what she told you in that message. And in that message, she told you in her own words that she felt safe, correct?
Objection. That's not what the message said, and I think the witness answered what the message said.
Ms. Stock, you wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm asking her to confirm what the message said, and that was in March of 2022. She felt safe.
The court's going to sustain the objection. That's only part of the message. The message can be referred to in full, so the answer that she gave will stand.
After you had this conversation with Becky, you didn't reach out to any of her family members, correct?
No,
You didn't call her mom and tell her mom that Becky's in danger, correct?
No, she
You
was,
didn't call her dad and say, Becky's scared, she needs help, did you?
if she would have asked me to do that, I would
You
have.
didn't do that, did you?
I did not.
And she did not ask you, did she?
She did not.
You did not reach out to her sister and tell your sister something might be going on with Becky, correct?
I did not.
You did not reach out to Becky's brother-in-law and say, Becky's scared, she might need some help, did you?
No.
You did not reach out to any of her attorneys and say, Becky is scared of Tim, she needs help, did you?
I had asked, it's not on that message, but
So
I
you
did
didn't
ask if
ask.
she
You
needed
didn't
help.
ask her, you didn't reach out to her attorneys, did you?
No, but I asked
You
if
did
she
not
needed help.
tell her to go, in these messages that you just testified to, you did not tell her to go get an order of protection, did you?
I asked if she had gone to the police. There's way more
In these
messages than
messages
that.
that you just testified to, ma'am, you did not tell her to go to the police, did you?
There was a very long conversation and not
Ma'am,
all of it is posted,
It's a
so.
yes or no question. Did you
I
tell
did.
her?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative. She's
That will be sustained. That's asked and answered. You may go on.
Did you refer her to a domestic violence shelter?
No.
No other questions, Judge?
Questions, Ms. Keck?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Ms. Mandel, do you wish that you would reach out to Becky's parents or her family?
I honestly was scared for her boys because I felt like there was more conversation.
Objection, Your Honor, this is non-responsive.
There was more
That-
conversation.
That will be sustained.
There was a very long
You
conversation.
can't-
Oh, sorry.
You can't answer that question. Ms. Keck's going to ask you another question. Go ahead.
Ms. Mandel, there were other messages between you and Becky that we didn't talk about this morning,
Yes.
correct?
Lots of them.
And in those messages, you talked to her about,
Objection.
That will, counsel? Right, that objection is overruled. You may ask your question, Ms. Keck.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Mandel, during this March 14th conversation, did you discuss with Becky different options to keep her safe?
Yes.
Tell us what you discussed.
I know for sure that I wanted to do something to help her, and I wanted her to tell me what that could be. I know that she tried to file for a restraining order, and I just thought, like,
Objection.
That will be sustained.
You
Must,
guys discussed different options during that conversation. Is that fair to say?
yes.
No other questions, Your Honor.
going to give you another chance, Ms. Schnock, if you wish.
Despite all those options, you did nothing, correct?
I did what I thought was right in that moment, and that was to listen.
No other questions, Judge?
Any other questions, Ms. Keck?
No, Your Honor,
All right,
thank you.
ma'am, you may step down. She released from her subpoena for the
Yes, Your
people.
Honor, I know that she was.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No.
All right. You're free to go, ma'am. Call your next witness.
People would call Kelly Massachusetts.
Okay? Make sure you have her spell her last name.
Maybe twice, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you could step to the front of the courtroom, please. And then raise your right hand, be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Okay, and if you come around here and have a seat right here in this chair. Then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable and bend the microphone in front of you, and you may inquire.
Can you tell me your name and please spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Kelly Massajuski. The last name is Maciejewski.
Ms. Massachusetts, what do you do for a living?
I work at the Illinois State Police Forensic Science Laboratory in Springfield.
What do you do for a living?
I primarily, solely work in the biology and DNA section.
How long have you been?
I've been employed with the state police in biology and DNA since October of 2001.
Tell me how you got that job. Was there any training you had to do before you even applied for the job?
Yes, well, my undergraduate degree was in biology and English from Albion College, which is in Albion, Michigan. And then I also have my Master's of Science in Forensic Science from the University of Illinois in Chicago. Once I was employed by the state police, I underwent an approximately 2-year training program with them specific to the discipline of biology and DNA analysis.
Can you tell me about a 2-year training program? What does that entail?
It entailed practical work in the laboratory as well as literature readings and the background of forensic biology and DNA. It involved tests, practical or supervised casework, which was where you work real casework under the direction of a supervised analyst. So all of that was within that 2-year training program.
And then at the end of that 2-year training program, did you have to test or do some type of certification to show that you obtained the requisite knowledge to do the job?
Well, that was sort of done throughout the time period of that 2 years where we had exams and things that we had to pass, both in the laboratory and written exams. And then, of course, that supervised casework where you're working the actual casework under the direction of an analyst. They had to agree that you were knowledgeable and trained in the discipline.
And did you pass all those tests?
Yes, I did.
After passing those tests and doing the job with the Illinois State Police, do you have to continue to be retested and recertified during those years?
Yes, we take 2 proficiency tests every year. And what that is it's just an outside vendor sends us a test where they obviously know the results, and then we have to do the testing and report our results out to them and obtain the correct results.
And have you passed all those steps as well?
Yes, I have.
At this point, we'd ask that Ms. Massachusetts, subject to any cross-examination, be certified as an expert in the area of DNA biology.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
She will be certified as an expert.
Ms. Massachusetts, first I want to talk to you about some testing you did in this case, specifically with regard to a set of bike handlebars. You remember that item?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell me, let's talk in general sense with relation to that bike handlebars, how DNA works. What is DNA?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and essentially what it is it's the building block of life. It's present in all cells, and it's what makes us who we are. It makes us human as compared to any other animal. It gives us our distinguishing characteristics then, which make us different from one another. Most of our DNA is, of course, the same, which is what makes us human, but there are differences among our DNA, which is what makes us all unique.
Your job then in that DNA section is to find DNA on different items and compare it to known standards to see if you can make a comparison. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the primary goal is to try and determine who may have been a contributor to any specific item.
In this case, with the set of the bike handlebars, explain to me how you go about that process. What's your first step?
The first step in the DNA process? The first step in the DNA process is what I tend to think of as just a washing machine for DNA. It's to remove the DNA off of the surface that it's on. So in the case of the bike handlebars, I collected a swab from those handlebars, and then I needed to perform the DNA extraction to remove the DNA from that swab and get it into a purified form. So it basically takes the DNA off of the swab, but also gets rid of all of the other cellular material so that what I'm left with is purified DNA in a tube.
Once you have that purified DNA, what do you do?
From that point, I would do the quantitation step, which is to determine how much DNA I was able to recover.
And after you determine, what is that for, how much DNA you recover?
For our testing system, which I will get into as I further explain the process, we have to have specific amounts of DNA to even attempt to try to get a profile, and really to determine if any human DNA is present there at all.
In this case, with regard to bike handles, were you able to recover your DNA?
Yes, I was.
And what was your next step? After you recovered the DNA, after you determined if there was enough, what did you do next?
I did have a limited amount of DNA from those handlebars, in which case then I performed what's called an amplification step, which is more or less a Xerox machine for DNA. It makes millions of identical copies of the DNA that I was able to recover. And that step is necessary for the DNA profiling, which is putting on the instrumentation that we use, which generates the end product or the DNA profile.
You did that in this case. After you did that, after you did the amplification process, what's the next step?
From that point, then, I will take a look at the data. I will determine how many contributors there may be present from that sample. DNA is not just always from a single person. Anything that is touched or handled, DNA is left behind. So it could be from multiple people to 3 or more people. So I have to take a look at the data to determine how many contributors I believe to be present on that. And then I use a program that I input my data into, and it will sort out the contributors to that sample and give DNA types that are the possible or plausible types into that DNA sample.
And what's that program called?
That program is StarMix, STRMIX.
Has StarMix been testified about in other cases?
Yes, it has.
It's been accepted in the scientific community as the best test to be using at this point for DNA testing?
Yes, it's a program that's used throughout the country in order to evaluate the DNA profiles.
In this case, after you amplify the DNA from the bike and put it into the StarMix program, what's the next step after that?
The next step after that is if you have standards for comparison to that profile or profiles, if it's a mixture, you then can input those standards into the StarMix program. And what it does is it determines if the data is best explained by that standard or person being a contributor to the sample, or if there's more support for that person to not be a contributor or be eliminated. So it weighs whether there is, it's more likely that the person is a contributor or is not a contributor.
In this case, you had some known standards.
I did, yes.
And you had known standards for the defendant, is that right?
Correct.
You had known standards for an individual by the name of Ted Johnson.
Correct.
And you had known standards for 3 young children, is that right?
Yes.
And those 3 young children were Rebecca's 3 children, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
You also had a known standard, I believe, for the victim's mechanism.
Yes.
I think that's all the known standards you have, is that correct?
Yes.
With regard to the bike handlebars, when you compared through your Starbucks program, the unknown sample with the known standards, were all of those individuals excluded from the bike handlebars?
Yes, the bike handlebars I determined to be from a single individual on the ones, I had 2 swabs that I had collected from the handlebars, but the one swab was a single source profile. And that single source profile, all of the standards I had were excluded from that profile.
I want to move on then to item 2A and 2B, which were swabs from a chair that were found outside of the victim's residence.
Are you referring to my item numbers?
I apologize, 20A and 20B, I said.
Yes, correct.
20A and 20B.
That's correct.
Did you test those swabs?
Yes, I did.
And was there any DNA on those swabs?
There was an extremely limited amount of DNA present on those swabs. I did attempt to profile them, but the data was so limited in nature that it was not suitable for any sort of comparisons.
I want to move on then to items 17A and 17B. Those are swabs from a bedroom door, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you tested those as well?
Yes, I did.
And you put those into that Star Mix program because I believe in this case there was a mixture of DNA, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
With regard to 17B and Ted Johnson was excluded from providing that sample, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with regard to Ted Johnson in 17A, there was limited support for the proposition that Ted Johnson is not a contributor to that DNA, correct?
Yes, there was more support that he was not a contributor to that sample.
With regard to the defendant in both 17A and 17B, there was limited support for the proposition that Tim Bliefnick, the defendant, is not a contributor for both 17A and 17B, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There was more support that he was not a contributor to that sample.
And with regard to who it was likely the DNA was from, there was moderate support or strong support for both 17A and 17B that the DNA belonged to Rebecca Bliefnick and one of the children.
Yes, that is correct.
I want to move on then to item 10A, which is a piece of plastic material that was found around the victim's body, is that correct?
Yes.
And again, you did all that testing on it, and it was a mixture of DNA, correct?
Yes, it was.
And one of those individuals, the DNA on that, was strong support that it was Rebecca Bliefnick's DNA.
Yes, there was strong support that she was a contributor to that sample.
You tested that sample against Ted Johnson,
Correct.
and in your expert opinion, there was very strong support for the proposition that Ted Johnson was not a contributor to that DNA profile.
Yes, that's correct. It is more likely to be explained by it being unknown individuals as opposed to him being a contributor to that sample.
In fact, it's 2.6 million times more likely, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also tested that sample against the defendant's DNA.
Yes, I did.
And there was limited support for the proposition that the defendant is a contributor to that DNA sample.
Yes, there was more support for him being a contributor to that sample as opposed to not being a contributor. However, that support was limited in nature.
In fact, it's 8 times more likely that the DNA originated from the defendant and an unknown, unrelated individual than if it came from 2 unknown, unrelated individuals.
Yes, there's more support for him being a contributor to that sample as opposed to not being a contributor.
I want to talk to you then about one other area of testing that you did, and that was specifically some fingernail clippings.
Okay.
You did some testing on some fingernail clippings,
Yes, I did.
specifically the fingernail clippings of the victim, Becky. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, that was a different type of testing than Starbucks, correct?
Yes, I did not use StarMix for the final interpretation step of those samples, and that is because when I did the quantitation step from the fingernails, the swabs that I had collected from the fingernails, it gave me an indication that I had a much larger amount of female DNA present as opposed to male DNA, and the level of male DNA that I was detecting would have never been observed in our standard type of testing that we perform.
So based on that, did you do a different type of testing?
Yes, I did.
And that's called YSTR.
Yes, it is.
Can you describe for me just briefly what YSTR testing is?
Yes, YSTR testing, what it is it's looking at DNA on the Y chromosome, which is only present in males. And so when I perform YSTR testing, I have the ability to essentially ignore all of the female DNA that is present because I'm targeting DNA specific on that Y chromosome, which females do not have. So when I perform the YSTR testing, I'm only going to pick up the male DNA that is present on that Y chromosome.
And in this case, you did that testing?
Yes, I did.
And is it fair to say, in your expert opinion, that it is 3 times more likely that the DNA profile that you observed underneath the victim's fingernails came from the defendant or the boys than anyone
Yes, in testing the 3 standards from the children as well as from Timothy Bliefnick, all of those individuals would be included as a potential contributor of the YSTR profile. And I should clarify with YSTRs that YSTR types are carried down a paternal line. So any male DNA that is present will also be the same DNA profile that is present in a father's sons, any brothers that he may have, his father, they will all have the same YSTR DNA profile.
The DNA profile, Ted Johnson was completely excluded from the DNA under Becky Bliefnick's family.
Yes, that is correct.
In a general sense, is it fair to say that of the items in the crime scene, there are no items that support the conclusion that Ted Johnson is associated or his DNA is associated with them?
Correct, none of the items that I tested.
And is it fair to say that there are items that support the conclusion that Tim Bliefnick and his DNA are associated with them?
Yes, I did have the items, the fingernails, as well as the plastic pieces that were found on Becky Bliefnick's body that had some support for that being a contribution from Timothy Bliefnick.
And one of those was 8 times more likely, and the other was 3 times.
Yes, that is correct.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Apologize, I forgot to ask you about the item 8A, the looter casing in the hallway.
Yes,
That was tested for DNA as well.
yes, it was.
And Ted Johnson and the defendant were excluded from that.
That's correct, yes.
And Becky Bliefnick's DNA was found on that shell casing that was, of course, on her carpet.
Yes, I had a single source DNA profile from that casing, and that was consistent with the profile of Becky Bliefnick.
That's all.
Cross, Michelle.
Ms. Masajuski, I have some questions for you. If you don't understand my questions or if they don't make sense, let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, so generally speaking, in your field, can DNA be transferred from one item to another?
Yes,
Okay, so if, say, for example, I have a bag and I send this bag with my son to his grandparents' house, would you likely find my DNA on my son's bag?
it's hard to say likely, but depending on your extent of contact with it and amount of touching, that it's definitely a possibility. Yes.
Okay, so again, if I pack that bag and I send that bag to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you could very well find my DNA at Grandma and Grandpa's house, even though I hadn't personally been in Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Again, potentially, yes. Again, depending on the extent of where the bag was put, how it was handled, how much DNA was originally on it. There are a lot of factors, but it's a possibility.
All right,
yes.
thank you. The first item that you talked about that you tested were bike handlebars.
Yes.
When you received those, were the bike handlebars attached to the bike or had they been removed?
They had been removed.
Okay, and did you personally swab the bike handlebars or did somebody else do that for you and then provided you the sample?
I collected the swabs off of the handlebars. I collected one swab from the right side and then one swab from the left side.
All right. And one of those samples, there was not enough DNA for you to test, correct?
Yes, I did profile the sample, but there was not enough DNA. It was very limited in nature, that it was not suitable for interpretations.
Okay.
And then the other swab had that single source profile that did not match any of the standards that I had testified to previously.
Okay. And those, through your testing, you were able to come up with one DNA profile for those bike handlebars, correct?
That's correct.
And Tim Bliefnick was excluded as a contributor for those bike handlebars, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And during your investigation and your testing, you were unable to come up with any DNA match for those bike handlebars, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also talked about swabbing some outside chairs, and I think those would have been lab item 20 and agency number 26, correct?
It was our items. I received 2 swabs. Those were not collected by me. They were collected by someone else, and the swabs were sent to our laboratory. I received 2 swabs, and I labeled them as 20A and 20B. Throughout my testing, I then combined those swabs because both were extremely limited in how much DNA was able to be obtained from them, so I combined them to try to get the best possible DNA profile.
And there was nothing that you were able to come up with, correct?
Yes, the DNA was still so limited in nature, it was not suitable for any comparisons.
All right. And as far as the, you were talking about the Y-star mix. So in how many different samples were you given to test against?
In total for the entire case, may I consult my notes?
Sure.
Not including standards, I had 19 samples that I performed DNA testing on.
Okay. And with respect to the Y-star testing, let's say 5 of those samples were of a father and his 4 male children.
Okay.
Would you be able to distinguish one profile from another in that scenario?
Based on, there can be mutations occasionally with a father to his male children. However, in this case, there were no mutations for the standards that I tested, which that being of Timothy Bliefnick and his 3 male children, they all had the exact same YSTR profile.
Okay, and that would not be surprising given the nature of how DNA works and the Y chromosome being attached to the male.
Yes, that is
There.
correct.
And so based on the Y-star testing, you cannot tell between Tim or Arlen or Grayson, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And can you tell if any of them should be excluded, or are they all included because they cannot be excluded?
Are you talking from the fingernails?
Yes.
No, they would, I cannot tell that any of them are excluded because they have the same DNA type that I was able to pull up with that YSTR testing, and it's consistent with all of them. So I can't tell you which one it may be or may not be.
You also tested some shell casings, correct?
Yes.
And none of those shell casings had matched, or you were unable to pull a DNA profile from any of those shell casings that matched Tim's DNA profile, correct?
Are you referring to the shell casings that were my item 1A?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. I had 7 shell casings that were swabbed. They were all found in a similar location. They were swabbed all together, and I did attempt to DNA profile them. However, the DNA recovered was so limited in nature, it was not suitable to do anything further with and not suitable for comparison to any standards.
Were you given any hair fibers to test against?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Were you given any clothing items to test against?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
May I interject? I just recalled one item. I did receive a pair of work gloves.
Okay, and there was no DNA that was recovered from those work gloves?
I examined those for the presence of blood, and there was no blood found on them and did not do anything further beyond that.
Okay, and to take one step back, just to be specific, item 8A was the shell casing that you tested from Becky's home, correct?
Yes, that shell casing was found separate from the others I just spoke about that were limited in nature and not able to be compared to standards. That one was found in the hallway, and so it was swabbed separately, and that had a DNA profile that was consistent with that of Becky Bliefnick.
Okay, and that, there was one DNA profile on item 8A, and you were able to exclude Tim, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Your Honor, if I could have a moment.
You may.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down. And is she released from her subpoena and free to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You're free to go, ma'am.
She should probably wait around because I think she's writing some of the last people, so
Okay. Call your next witness.
we call Jim Briggins for this one.
Given the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth.
And then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, and then bend that microphone so it's in front of you and speak towards the microphone, please. You may inquire.
Can you tell me your name, please?
James Riggins.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Riggins?
I'm a forensic scientist,
How long have you done it?
17 and a half years.
Who do you work for?
Illinois State Police.
You've worked for them all 17 and a half years of your career?
Yes, I have.
Mr. Riggins, before you got the job with the Illinois State Police as a forensic scientist, did you do any training to get that job?
Yes.
Can you tell us briefly what that training consisted
Well,
of?
it included 7 months of training in paint analysis, 8 months of training in glass analysis, 9 months of training in fire debris analysis, week training in physical match analysis, and also a couple days of primary gunshot residue collection.
I guess I should ask you, as a forensic scientist, is there a particular area that you are
I just wanted to pause for a second. I had promised you a recap at the end of each witness, and I was drying my hair. Christine Mandel. So the very first one we had this morning. She's a former Quincy resident who currently resides in California. She worked with Becky at CrossFit and described Becky's pride in getting back into shape. She mentioned that she and Becky communicated through Facebook Messenger. Mandel shared that Becky expressed fear about Tim losing control if he didn't get his way, citing examples of coworkers who had been murdered. Becky also expressed her resolve to never allow Tim into her house, which again, I'm a divorced, well, you can't hear me, can you? Oh, yes, you can. I'm divorced, and, we let each other into each other's houses now, but at the time, that was, he was the devil. During cross-examination, Mandel clarified that when they had conversations on Messenger, they hadn't had any substantive discussions since 2021 until their conversation in March of 2022. So this is like almost a whole year before Becky was murdered. March 2022, when Becky expressed fear of Tim, Mandel admitted that she hadn't reached out to anyone or referred Becky to a domestic violence organization. So that was the first woman. She was kind of crying. I'm sure she's scared, and it's sad. The second witness, Kelly Majeski, a forensic scientist from Illinois State Police. Kelly testified about DNA found on bike handlebars. She explained that she had extracted DNA from the handlebars and compared it with DNA samples from Tim, Becky, and the Bliefnick children, and Ted Johnson. I keep going back to this Ted Johnson, and I'll explain later. The analysis revealed limited support for Tim's DNA on plastic near Becky's body, but the DNA under Becky's fingernails could potentially belong to any of the Bliefnick children. Okay, that's weird to me because she was murdered the early morning hours of the 23rd. She wasn't supposed to see the children, it's my understanding, until after school on the 23rd. So why would fingernail under DNA potentially belong to any of the kids? That makes zero sense at all. So again, I'm kind of going back to, did law enforcement completely bungle this whole entire thing? Like, why didn't they test Tim for GSR? Did they ever test Ted for GSR? Have they looked at Becky's phone? Was she interacting with anybody other than Ted and Tim? I don't know. During cross-examination, the defense focused on lack of sufficient DNA to determine a match on the handlebars and absence of any DNA apart from Becky's on the tested shell casings found in the home. So many questions. Actually, under Muddy River's Twitter, they had an article saying something along the lines of, defense is weighing whether or not Tim should testify, and I just put no. Because, for starters, I think the state's evidence is extremely flimsy here. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be speaking about this, because what do I know? I'm an accountant with 4 kids. Okay, so now this guy, Jim Riggins, and again, separately, I'm putting together a timeline of all 6 days of the trial. Keep in mind, there wasn't any testimony the first day because that was jury selection. So day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 days of testimony. I'm putting together a timeline of specific times they mentioned. And also under Muddy River's news, I hope the defense has Ted Jones' cell phone information, and vehicle tracking information if available, and Becky's information, because, have they laid out a foundation that Becky could have had? Ted did say that their relationship was very casual. So, and Becky was upset that their relationship was just casual. So could it be she was seeing someone else or a couple other people. Who knows? But wouldn't that be nice to have? Again, that lays reasonable doubt. You're innocent until the state can prove that you did it. And so far, other than him being a jackass and, you know, some questionable Google searches, and then again, putting together like the timeline of his fitness tracker. And, you know, some of his Google searches are in the middle of the night. Is he a drinker? A lot of his spelling was screwed up. Maybe he gets drunk and weird in the middle of the night. I don't know. She was murdered in the middle of the night. I don't know. So this guy, Jim Riggins, is another Illinois State Police forensic scientist specializing in trace analysis. Riggins presented shards of an Aldi bag and pointed out similarities between the shards and the Aldi bag. However, since the actual bag was not present, Riggins deemed the findings inconclusive, emphasizing that there were no scientific certainty, only similarities. Again, why is the state trying to prove that he is guilty, putting on such flimsy witness? I mean, who of you has an Aldi bag in your house? Who of you has an Aldi bag that might be ripped because maybe you put too many tomatoes in, or too many gallons of milk in there? I don't know. Okay, back to it. There's not a lot of people watching right now, so I feel like I can talk more. Anyway, I'm still drying my hair.
With doing that job.
It's called trace chemistry analysis.
After you did that training and you got the job with the Illinois State Police, are there additional tests or certifications that you have to receive on a yearly basis to continue your employment?
Yes, they're called proficiency tests. You must complete them. It's a 100%, and you're given an unknown to where you have to match it.
And it has to be 100%. If you miss any, you're gone.
You're gone.
Have you passed all those tests?
Yes, I have.
Every test for the last 17 and a half years?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, at this point, we would ask that the witness be identified as an expert in the area of trace chemistry and item analysis.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
He will be so certified.
Mr. Riggs, I want to talk to you in a general sense then about what you do if you're given an item and asked to compare that item to determine, you know, if it's inconclusive, a match, whatever phrasing you use as a forensic scientist, okay?
Yes.
Can you tell us in a general sense what it is when you receive some sample or an ask to compare it?
Yes, I examine it microscopically and then by way of visual acuity. Just examine the class characteristics of it, and that includes things like the color, the dimensions, size, the perforations, and then I analyze that information to propose that if there's a physical match or not.
In this case, were you given some items and asked to do such a comparison?
Yes, I will.
When you do that examination, do you also take photographs that are to document your work in a sense?
Yes, they're called record shots, yes.
They're called what?
Record shots.
Record shots?
Yes.
If I could approach you with.
You may.
I'm going to hand you a group exhibit, but they're marked individually with different exhibit numbers. Ask you to take a look at those photographs and tell me when you've had a chance to review all those photographs.
Yes, complete.
Have you had a chance to review all those?
Yes, I did.
Are those all photographs that you took in the process of doing that comparison?
Yes, they are.
The record shots that you described to us?
Correct.
Your Honor, we'd ask, and they fairly show what they're intended to show.
Correct, yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that people exhibit 135 through 143 be introduced into evidence and leave the public as appropriate.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted.
We can have 135. Mr. Riggins, are these the pieces of plastic that you were provided? And it's your item 10-2, but for the record, it is also Exhibit 240 that previously introduced into evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So you said you would take these items, look at them visually, and then eventually compare them to something else, is that right?
Correct, yes.
In this case, were you given another item to compare them to?
Yes, I was.
Excellent. On the screen now, in the middle of the screen is exhibit, or what we have up on the screen is exhibit 136. In the middle of the screen, we have item 33-6. Is that the item that you were given to compare it to?
Yes,
And again, for the record, that is our exhibit 240, which is all the bags from the defendant saw, correct?
yes,
And next to the side of it is item 10-2, one of those pieces of plastic.
correct.
Tell me how you compare that piece of plastic to the all bag.
Similarities, I look at the class characteristics, which include color, surface markings, and also the texture, the type of material that are included in both of those items.
Well, let's talk about first the texture of item 33-6 and item 10-2. Did the texture of the item appear to be the same to you?
Yes,
You said you also talked about color, so would you look at the pink that's on the Aldi bag and the pink that's on the piece of plastic?
yes.
And here you say color?
It's similar in characteristics, yes.
And then next to the pink is a green piece of plastic, right? Next to the pink here, next to the pink is green, right? Well,
Yes, yellowish green, yeah, bright yellow.
it's a color that appears to be some shade of yellowish green.
Yes, yes,
And on the piece of plastic, did you notice that same weird, strange shade of color?
yes, I did.
And next to that, how about orange? We call that orange.
Yes,
And next to the piece of green on that is orange, is that right?
yes,
And next to the orange is white.
correct.
And you see white on that piece of plastic.
Yes,
Is the next step in your analysis to see if that piece of plastic basically fits over the Aldi bag in a same location?
yes, compare as close as I can, yes.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Next slide, please. And here we showed it going closer.
Yes, yes,
And that's equals 137. Next slide. And here we see the piece of plastic laid on top of the Aldi bag, correct?
correct.
And you see the pink appears to match, that color appears to match, the orange appears to match, the white appears to match.
Correct.
And in fact, you see between the pink and the orange a little stripe of white that would appear to match as well.
Yes,
Next slide. Please. And again, just a closer view
correct.
of that. Now, your report says that this is not a match, correct? You can't say it's a match.
I can only note that there were similarities in the characteristics. However, due to the lack of a broken, cut, or torn in any of the 18 bags that were compared to, a physical match is precluded.
So your report says it's inconclusive but consistent with similar characteristics.
Yes,
You also, next slide please, had item 13, which is another set of pieces of plastic, which I believe are exhibit 142. Is that correct?
yes, the item number
Item
13, lab item 13.
And you did the same testing that you just talked about before with these pieces of plastic as well, is that right?
Yes, and it was noted as that they were printed letters.
And you see the letters here and some letters there.
Yes,
Next slide, please. And there was some printed letters on item 33-6 as well, correct?
yes,
On the bottom of the bag.
right.
And you did that same thing where you would put the piece of plastic on the Aldi bag to see if it's similar.
Correct.
Next slide, please. And this is exhibit 142, showing it right above the printed lettering.
Correct, yes.
And 143, please. And this is the piece of plastic on top of the printed lettering on the item 33-6, the Aldi bag from the defense.
Yes,
And again, your report says inconclusive, fair to say?
yes,
But again, there are consistencies between the two pieces with similar class characteristics.
yes,
But you can't say, as a scientist, that that is a match,
correct,
because you don't have the bag that it was torn out.
correct, yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Questions, Ms. Stein?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Sir, in conducting your testing, you were given 18 whole grocery bags, is that fair?
That is fair, yes.
And then you were given partial fragments to compare that to, correct?
Yes, correct.
And The only thing that you can tell us that there were similarities between the little pieces of plastic that you were given and the larger grocery bags that were provided, correct?
Correct, yes.
And you cannot say with scientific certainty that they are a match, correct?
Correct, that's correct.
And you cannot tell us where the bags came from, correct?
Correct,
You can't tell us where they were produced, correct?
correct,
You can't tell us how old they are, correct?
correct.
The only thing that you can tell us is that those 18 bags looked similar to the plastic pieces, but you can't say with scientific certainty that there's any correlation or that there's a match between those two, correct?
That is correct, not a match.
No other questions, Judge?
And you're up.
No, you're up.
All right, you may step down. And is he related to the subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No.
All right. Free to go, sir.
Thank you.
Call your next witness.
We would call Catherine Buell.
Ma'am, if you could step up to the front of the courtroom, please. You may. Go ahead, raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Okay. Then if you'll come around here and have a seat right here in this chair. And kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, and then bend that microphone so it's in front of you. And then in just a minute, when we're ready, we're going to have you speak towards the microphone, okay?
Can you tell me your name, please?
My name is Catherine Doolin, and it's spelled Kathryn. Doolin is Doolin.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic scientist at the Illinois State Police.
What type of forensic science do you specifically practice, or is there a particular area that you're responsible for?
I'm a forensic scientist specializing in firearms, tool marks, tire track, and footwear analysis.
Ms. Doolin, how did you get that job? Was there any specialized training you had to do?
I graduated from the University of Missouri Columbia with a Bachelor in Science in 2013 and a minor in psychology, and is when I was trained by the Illinois State Police during my employment for the specialized fields.
How long was that training?
For firearms, it was an 18-month modular-based program. For tool marks, it was 6 months, and for footwear and tire track, it was 8 months.
And in that program, are there required testing that you have to complete in order to pass that program?
Yes, there are.
And did you pass all those tests?
Yes, I did.
Since you've been working for the Illinois State Police, and how long have you been working for them?
I've been working since February of 2015.
Since you've been working for them for about the last 8 years, are there continuing testing that you have to do on a yearly basis in order to show proficiency in keeping it up?
Yes, we have yearly proficiency tests that I'm required to pass.
And those are 100%, you have to pass that with a 100% score or you're gone.
Correct.
And you've done that every year, right?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, we would ask that the witness be identified as an expert in the area of tool marks and shoe prints.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
She will be so certified as an expert.
Ms. Newland, in this case, I want to start with a shoe print that you were provided, okay?
Okay,
And you were in fact provided a shoe print. We've seen some pictures of that. Is that right?
that's correct.
When you were provided with that shoe print, did you make any notice anything about it?
I received a piece of carpet with a left partial footwear impression on it.
Well, when you say partial, what does that mean when you say partial shoe print?
That the shoe print was not complete, that it did not go from toe to heel and was not complete. It only showed the toe in the arch area.
Because of that, because you did not have a complete heel, is it limited in what you can do?
Yes, it is.
So, for example, if I ask you to tell me what size that shoe print was, can you do that?
I cannot.
Can you even give us a range of what size it could be?
I cannot give a size based on a shoe print or an outsole itself due to different shoes having various outsole sizes, and different manufacturers can have a different size. Say Adidas can have the same size, size 13 versus a work boot could be a different size 13.
So is it fair to say that different manufacturers could have different sizes? So an Adidas 13 might not be the same as a Nike 13.
That's correct.
And an Adidas outsole on a size 13 might be bigger or smaller than a work boot outsole at the bottom of the shoe.
That's correct.
In fact, it's more correct to call it a shoe print than a footprint. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
You can't tell us how that shoe print got there?
No, I cannot.
You can't tell us anything about that shoe print at this point, other than that it's a partial shoe print.
That's correct.
In this case, you were given a pair of shoes to compare that shoe print with.
Yes, I was.
You're able to do that even with just the partial print. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I'm able to make test impressions of the shoes and compare them directly to the impression that was left on the carpet.
The shoes that you were given, you were able to eliminate them.
Yes, I was.
So the shoes that you were given did not make that shoe print.
No, they did not.
Now, you're not able to say that the defendant did make those shoe prints. just
Objection.
not that the shoes
That-
did.
Objection.
Stop, Mr. Jones. What's,
It's argumentative.
that will be sustained. Rephrase your question, Mr. Jones.
You're only able to tell us that the shoes that you were given didn't make the shoe.
That's correct.
Even if you had the shoes, you couldn't tell us who wore the shoes.
That's correct.
I want to move on then to the area of tool marks. Can you tell us how, in general, tool marks are compared to tools?
So when a tool is submitted to the lab, I make test marks of the tool and compare the test marks that I make and compare them to the unknown or suspect tool marks that are left at the scene under a comparison microscope and look for microscopic reproduction and agreement of the detail within the marks to determine if that tool made those tool marks left at the scene.
So in layman's terms, you take the tool that you're provided, you try to make a tool mark that's similar to the tool mark that you have, and then you compare the two microscopically and see if there's similarity.
Yes, I do.
When you're given a particular tool and do that, can you describe for me the difficulty in making a similar tool?
Yes, so tool marks is a little different because the angle at which the tool was used, the pressure at which the tool was used, the material in which the tool marks were made, all affect how the reproduction of that tool mark is made. So it is difficult to reproduce exactly the circumstances that were at the scene versus at the crime lab.
In other words, in order to compare the tool marks and get what we'll refer to as a match, you have to exactly duplicate the manner in which the tool was used to make those marks.
Yes, in the area that the tool comes in contact with the surface at the scene has to be the exact location in order to get that replication.
So you have to use the same angle,
Correct?
the same pressure,
Correct?
the same force,
Correct?
the same manner that it's used in,
That's correct, as well as the same materials.
and the same material.
Mhm.
In this case, were you given a window that has the tool marks on it?
Yes, I was.
And in fact, you were given at one point a multi-tool from the defendant's car, is that right?
That's correct.
That you were able to exclude from making those same marks.
Yes, I was.
You were also given a probe mark, correct?
Yes, I was.
And Ms. Doolin, when you did the comparison, do you take those record shots that we heard Mr. Riggins testify about?
I do take record shots for each case that I work.
And you took some record shots in this case, is that right?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as People's Exhibits 178 to 184.
Sorry. My timing is off here. Okay, so this is Catherine Doolin. She is going to be she's a Illinois State Police forensic scientist specializing in foot shoe prints and tire marks. She will discuss her examination of a partial print found at Becky's house and compare it to a pair of shoes. However, she won't be able to definitively determine if those shoes had made the print. She also will talk about attempts to replicate tool marks found at the crime scene using a multi-tool and a crowbar. While similarities and consistencies will be acknowledged, the complete identification cannot be made, and the crowbar can't be ruled out. Under cross-examination, she will state that Tim's shoes had been excluded as a match for the impression at the crime scene. Again, more evidence in Tim's favor. There's no scientific certainty that the crowbar found at the scene belonged to Tim. I'm just saying, this case is so weird. Back.
I'll ask you to look at those. Have you had a chance to look at those?
Yes, I have.
Are those the record shots, the photographs that you took in this case of that examination?
Yes, they were.
Your Honor, we'd ask that people 178 through 184 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Schnott?
No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted.
You have the first slide, please. Ms. Doohan, up on the screen is a crowbar, a pry bar, lab item 31, which is our exhibit 237. You recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that the crowbar, the pry bar that you used in testing?
Yes, it was.
Next slide, please. Now on the screen is exhibit 179. Is that the same pry bar but flipped over on the other side?
Yes, it is.
Next slide, please. Here we have a close-up of what you call working edges A and B. Can you tell me what that means, working edges?
Yes, so this is the area on the pry bar that, of interest that I used to make the test marks to compare to the unknown tool marks.
And equals 181. And that's working edges C and D, is that right?
Yeah, so that's just the opposite side of A and B.
Moving on to equals 182. What are we looking at here?
So this is a record shot of one of the tool marks that was recorded on the window that was submitted to the lab.
And you told us that you used that crowbar, working edges A and B, to try to recreate these tool marks.
Yes, I did.
And when you did that, you then looked at both under a microscope and compared them.
Yes, I compared them on the comparison microscope.
When you compared the tool marks that you made with the tool marks in 54-1, did you notice similarities and consistencies between the two tool marks?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain for us then, if you notice these consistencies and these similarities between the tool mark that you made with the crowbar in the defendant's basement and the tool marks here, why your report says inconclusive?
I went inconclusive between the pry bar and the tool marks on the window because there was not enough detail in the microscopic detail in the tool mark between this unknown tool mark and the test marks I made to make a complete identification.
But again, you notice similarities and consistencies between the two.
Correct.
Equals 183. Again, just a close-up of that tool mark that had the similarities and consistencies with the tool mark that you made,
That's correct.
and equals 184. Just another angle of that same thing.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that you can't eliminate that tool from making that tool mark, but there are not enough similarities? You notice those similarities, but not enough because you couldn't recreate the exact circumstances of how the tool mark was made to say that it's an.
That's correct.
That's all the questions I have.
Cross, Ms. Schnott.
Ms. Doolin, I have a few questions for you, okay? So bear with me. When you're doing testing, whether it's in this case or any other case, you put your findings into a report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in those reports, you tell us what you tested and what your findings are, correct?
That's correct.
And you did that in this case with respect to the footwear impression as well as the pry bar marks, correct?
That's correct.
And I want to first talk about the footwear impressions, okay? You were given one left shoe that was a size 13 Reebok CrossFit athletic shoe, correct?
Correct.
And you were also given a right Reebok CrossFit athletic shoe that was a size 13, correct?
Correct.
You were not given any other shoes to test, correct?
No, I was not.
And you were not given any photographs of any other shoes to compare or test against, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. And in your testing, you were able to eliminate both the left and right shoe, correct?
That's correct.
And that was put into a report, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Ms. Doolin, I'm handing you what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 2.
Okay.
And this is with respect to the footwear impression, and take a look at that. And let me know when you've had time to go over it.
Okay.
Okay, is that your report?
Yes, it is.
And is that your signature on the last page of the report?
Yes, it is.
And is that the report where you specifically state that those shoes were excluded against the foot impression that you were given from the crime scene?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I would ask the defendant's exhibit to be admitted, and I don't have any other questions
Any-
with respect to that exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
That will be admitted.
Now, with respect to the pry bar and the multi-tool, again, you did a similar report after you did your testing, correct?
Correct.
And with respect to the multi-tool and the pry bar, you were given those to test against some casts that were made on the window from the crime scene, correct?
I was given them to compare to the tool marks made on the window.
Okay, and were you given the actual window from the crime scene, or were you given a cast?
I was given the actual window, and I made casts myself during my examination.
Okay, fair enough. And during your testing, you were able to eliminate completely the multi-tool, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, correct?
That's correct.
And you cannot say with scientific certainty whether or not the crowbar made those marks, correct?
That's correct.
And your report indicated that those findings were inconclusive, fair?
That's fair.
So you can't say with scientific certainty one way or another whether that tool made those marks, correct?
Correct.
And what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 3? Is that your report?
Yes, it is.
And that is your signature on the back page?
It is.
And that is where you incorporate your findings that eliminated the multi-tool, correct?
Correct.
And found the pry bar inconclusive?
Correct.
I would ask the Defendant's Exhibit 3 be admitted, Your Honor, and do not have any other questions.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, number 3 will be admitted. And no other questions, Ms. Schnapp?
No.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, if you could hand those to the bailiff, please. And then is she free to go?
Yes, but she should probably wait for our next witness to finish too, so.
Well, we're going to take our morning break at this point, so since we're in between witnesses,
Two.
all right, and then are you going to be finished this morning, or are we going to have one this afternoon?
So here's where we are, Your Honor. Our next witness is Becky Reels, the firearms expert. I would anticipate her going 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm figuring we're at 11:15 or so. Our problem is the next witness, Nick Eddy, is our last witness. He's going to be a while.
Let's leave him till this afternoon, all right, and then we'll give the jury that. And then I've told defense they don't need to have any witnesses until tomorrow anyway, so then we'll have several things to take care of, which has the jury, and we'll just have the jury come back. 170 people versus 10. Mr. Jones, any? Have a seat right here on this, speak towards the microphone, please.
Okay.
You may inquire.
Can you tell me your name, please?
Vicky Reels.
And Ms. Reels, what do you do?
Okay, let me find my Vicky Reels. Okay, so she is Illinois State Police firearms identification expert. She will explain the distinct characteristics each gun leaves on fired bullets, likening them to like how fingerprints are explained. She examined 8 shell casings from the crime scene and testified that they were all fired by the same firearm. Makes sense. She confirmed that the bullets removed from Becky's body matched the shell casings. Makes sense. Indicating they were fired from either a CZ or a Ruger. She also mentioned that 27 shell casings found in Tim's basement were fired by the same gun. So that places shell casings in Tim's basement with the same markings as the shell casings found in Becky's body and in the scene. During cross-examination, the defense questions the comparison process and the testing of different guns. She confirmed that she hadn't compared all 8 casings to each of the 27 casings and hadn't tested the gun responsible for the shots. Reels mentioned that her findings had gone through a peer review process. So hopefully we'll hear about this peer-reviewed process. And then they will break for lunch, and then we'll skippity-doo to the next witness, the last state's witness, which is in the other video. So I guess I'm curious to see. So she says the 27 shell casings found in Tim's basement were fired by the same gun, but then the defense asks if she compared all 8 to each of the 27. She did not do that. So how would she know? She should say, I found 27 casings, of which X amount was fired by the same gun. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say at this point, I guess.
I am a forensic scientist that specializes in firearms, footwear, and tire track examinations.
Do you do that for the Illinois State Police?
I do.
How long have you done that for?
I was hired in June of 1997. 26 years?
26?
Yeah.
Now, certain witnesses do not want to have their testimony on camera, so I'm assuming this is one of those. That's why we're back to the defense table. I'm really curious. The day 7 testimony is ready to begin in 1 minute. So I'm going to be over on the Twitter world. I'm very curious as to where the defense is going to go. Because if I was her, I would just keep pounding the fact that there's circumstantial evidence, but have we really placed him like with a GPS at the crime scene at the time? And I would also probably hammer home the fact that law enforcement really dropped the ball here by testing him for gunshot residue, doing their due diligence with the TED. Like, did they look at anyone other than this guy? I don't know. See, this is where I would want to be a defense witness or a defense attorney. Because I think I don't know. You got to remember that the law is written so that the state has to prove that he is guilty. They have to present evidence that puts the gun in his hand at the time the crime was committed. Not the gun in his hand 2 weeks beforehand when he was at the gun range or shooting targets in his backyard or whatever. I don't know. Don't be mad at me.
It's a civil business.
Yeah.
Ms. Reels, tell me how you got that job with the Illinois State Police. Did you have to do some specialized training before you got the job?
Well, I have a degree in biology from Illinois State University.
There she
and
is.
then
So
once hired
never mind my
by
comment.
the Illinois State Police, you go through specialized training depending on what discipline you're being hired into. So I participated in a formal training program with the Illinois State Police that was approximately 2 years in length. The training was conducted at the Forensic Science Center at Chicago.
And that training was in the area of firearms, tool marks, firearms.
That was exclusively firearms. Footwear and tire tracks, I was trained in about 10 years later, and I am not specialized for tool mark examination.
With regard to firearms, you've been doing that over the last 26 years.
Yes.
And every year you have to do another proficiency test, if you will, to keep the job.
Yes.
Can you describe that test for me?
It is just a test that's supplied by an external forensic testing system where they provide items that we have to examine like we do any other evidence and report what the findings are based on the items that were received.
And you have to score 100% on that exam or you lose your job, right?
Correct.
Every year that you've taken that test for the last 26 years, have you passed that test?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask this witness be certified as an expert in the area of firearms and firearm identification.
Any objection, Ms. Schneider?
No, Your Honor.
She will be so certified.
Let's talk in a general sense then first about firearm identification and why that works. Can you explain to me the process of how a gun fires a bullet, fires a projectile?
Sure. Well, when the ammunition before it's fired is a cartridge, and that's made up of your cartridge case, your primer, your powder, and your projectile or projectiles. And when a firearm is fired and a cartridge is discharged, the bullet's going to travel down the barrel of the firearm, and at that point, go ahead.
And when the bullet travels down the barrel, does the barrel leave specific marks on that bullet?
Yes, it does. It picks up the microscopic machining marks from the manufacturing process.
And does every gun have slightly different marks that it leaves on that bullet?
Yes.
And every gun leaves different marks on the bullet based on the gun. Is that fair to say?
Yes, based on the manufacturing process, beyond the classification of the class characteristics that the gun is designed with.
So is it fair to say if you have two separate guns, even of the same brand, let's say you had two different 9mm guns, same brand, everything else is the same, when that bullet is fired and it goes down the barrel, you're going to be able to tell the difference between those bullets and which guns they came out of based on the marks that are left on the bullet?
Yes, and there have been studies conducted with both bullets and cartridge cases where you have been provided like 10 consecutively manufactured barrels of a firearm from a specific manufacturer, or 10 consecutively manufactured breech faces, and given pieces of fired evidence. And we had to determine which barrel or which breech face the fired evidence was fired from.
You used a term that we may not be familiar with. I think we all know what barrel of the gun is, but what's a breech face?
The breech face is the rear inside chamber portion of the firearm. That is where the primer seats against the gun and the firing pin strikes the primer.
And so when that breech face hits the end of the cartridge, the end of the full of the cartridge, it leaves individual marks as well.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that when a gun fires a cartridge, fires a bullet, it leaves fingerprints on that shell casing and on that bullet?
Yes,
And just like everyone's fingerprints are different, every gun leaves different identifying marks on every shell casing and every bullet it fires.
yes.
And it leaves the same markings on every shell casing and every bullet it fires.
It will. They want, from one to the other, you won't necessarily have an exact reproduction, but you will see a pattern reproduce with those similarities from one item to the next in that.
And based on that, you're able to determine if you're given 2 shell casings, you're able to determine if those shell casings were fired from the same gun, correct?
Yes,
If you can compare them and if they have the same marks, then you know, well, if they have the same fingerprints from that gun, you can tell that it's fired from the same gun.
yes, you're looking for that reproduction between those items.
And if you're given 2 bullets, the projectiles that were fired, you're able to look at those, and again, in layman's terms, you can see if it has the same gun fingerprint on each of those bullets.
Yes,
In this case, were you given at first 8 shell casings from the crime scene?
yes,
And did you compare those?
I did.
And when you compare those, do you take different photographs of your comparisons so that your work can be reviewed and also that you have a documentation of what you've done and what you're looking at? Is that right?
That is correct.
And you did that in this case, correct?
I did.
You may.
Can I hand you what's been marked as people's 185 through 189? You tell me if you have a chance to look at those.
Okay.
Are those photographs that you took, your record shots, if you will, to record your work in this case?
Yes,
And do you accurately show what you observed and what you saw in your life?
yes.
We'd ask that People's Exhibits 185 through 189 be introduced today.
Any objection, Ms. Schnott?
No, Your Honor.
185 through 189 will be admitted and may be shown.
Tell me the process of how you compare 2 shell casings. How do you do that?
Well, we use a comparison microscope when comparing any 2 items, whether it's 2 bullets to each other, 2 cartridge cases to each other, or if we have test shots from a gun, if a gun is submitted, we can compare the bullets or cartridge cases that are known to be from that firearm to the unknown evidence. And what a comparison microscope is essentially 2 compound microscopes that are joined by an optical bridge. So they allow you to see 2 separate items on 2 separate stages through the same field of view, and they are actually side by side, so you can see both right next to each other.
How does that help you compare those, let's say, in this case, 2 shell casings?
Well, what that allows you to do is to look for the reproduction of those marks, because what we're looking at is that overall pattern. So that's the length, the width, the depth, and the spatial relationship between the marks that are left on these items. And so it allows you to move across the surface of those 2 items and evaluate from one side to the other if those marks continue to reproduce between the 2.
And in your record shots, the photographs that you take, you use that comparison microscope to take those photographs.
Yes,
We have the first slide. So at the top of the screen, we see that we have item 1 on the right and item 2 on the left. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And at the bottom, it says black index at 6 o'clock. Can you explain that for me?
That is just how we mark items, so that if another examiner or anyone else wants to take a look at this, they can put the 2 items up and phase them similar in order to go back and find the same areas that I'm looking at. So the black index at 6 o'clock actually is not visible within these 2 images. It is on the head stamp area of the cartridge case. So it is on the actual cartridge case itself, just not visible within the image.
The black dot is the black index at 6 o'clock, basically, so you can line up those 2 shell casings.
Yes.
In the same
Phasing.
phasing. And magnification here is 40x, so that's 40 times what you can see with the naked eye.
Yeah, it just says that both of those, that's the level of magnification I have in order to see that detail that's shown there.
So here we have item 2 on the left, item 1 on the right. These are 2 of the 8 shell casings that were recovered from the scene, correct?
Correct.
And tell us what we're looking at here, Ms. Reels.
Well, I have a box around the area, the white box, around the area that I am representing here that you can see from one item to the other, the consistency of those lines as they continue across. So
this little white line in the middle, that's what separates item 2 from item 1.
that's correct. That is a hairline that with the microscope, I have the ability to move that line from left to right to look at those 2 items as as I examined them. And that's just the position that it was in when I observed that area between items 1 and 2.
And do you continue this examination, basically move this white line across the face or the back of that cartridge casing so that you can continue to see if there's more consistencies as you go forward?
Yes, I do that with each of the items.
We go to 186. Is this just showing, again, the same thing, you're moving that
Hairline.
from left to right and comparing the markers?
Yes, that's correct. That's actually the firing pin area that I have marked there. So that's the piece that actually strikes the primer and ignites the powder within the cartridge that burns and allows the projectile to travel down the barrel.
And equals 187. And again, is this, again, we're just moving that hairline a little further to the right, and again, you're comparing the marks on where the firing pin is.
Yes,
Again, all of these are item 1 and item 2, black index, 6 o'clock, magnification 40.
correct.
You did the same comparison on all 8 of those shell cases.
Yes,
In your scientific opinion, and in the 26, using the training that you've received at the Illinois State Police, and the 26 years of experience where you've passed every test 100%, can you tell us what you can tell about those 8 shell cases?
all of the 8 shell casings that were submitted were fired by the same firearm.
I want to move on then to the bullets, the projectiles that were recovered at the scene, okay? And from Becky Bliefnick's file. I want to talk about those. Those were lab items 16, 18, 23, 24, and 25. 16 and 18 were recovered at the scene. 23, 24, and 25 were removed during the autopsy from Becky's body, correct?
That's my understanding.
Did you do the same type of testing on those projectiles?
Yes,
Use the comparison microscope, just like you did here.
correct.
And again, you're looking for that same fingerprint, if you will, on each of those projectiles.
Correct.
And looking at lab items 16, 18, 23, 24, and 25, what can you tell me about those items?
As far as my determination,
Yes.
that those items were all identified as being fired by the same firearm.
I want to talk about the shell casings at the scene and the bullets at the scene, okay, and specifically the bullets at the scene. In looking at those bullets and the markings, the rifling that are on the bullets as they've been fired, can you tell us what the rifling is? What that is?
Well, the rifling, they're helical grooves that are manufactured in the barrel of a firearm, and the purpose of those is to stabilize the projectile in flight, similar to putting a spin on a bullet or on a football when you throw it. It's going to stabilize it so that it doesn't tumble. So rifling has that purpose, but manufacturers can design rifling differently in that the twist that they may put into the barrel could twist to the left, or it may twist to the right, the spin to the left, spin to the right. The number of lands and grooves designed.
When you say lands and grooves, can you tell us what that means?
Sure. That's just the raised and lowered portions in the barrel that actually create the rifling. So you want to have a different depth to those pieces so that it will bite into the bullet and force the spin on it. And manufacturers can choose to vary in the number of lands and grooves that they use, and the actual width or the dimensions of those can vary.
And based on the number of lands and grooves and the right or left twist, are you able to eliminate or include certain firearms as firing that particular bullet?
Yes,
And did we ask you to do that in this case as well?
yes,
And in doing that, did you determine that both a CZ and a Ruger could fire, could have the same characteristics, lance and grooves, right or left twist, as the bullets that were removed from Becky's body and that were found at the scene?
those were manufacturers that were included in the list when I entered all of the information regarding the rifling and the measurements, yes.
And to be fair, there were other firearms that would also have those same characteristics.
Yes,
But 2 of them were a CZ and a Ruger.
yes,
You were also given a Ruger from the defendant's house to test fire and compare, is that right?
I was given a firearm, yes.
And did you do that testing?
I did,
When we say that, is it fair to say you basically fire that firearm, collect the bullet, collect the shell casing, and compare it just like you have here with you?
yes,
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting the bullet or the shell casing that were recovered at the scene, is that right?
the firearm I examined was not the firearm used for the, for an identification, yes, correct.
Now, you were also given 54 shell casings that were
Not.
recovered in the defendant's basement,
I did have additional cartridge cases, yes,
and there were 54, is that right?
yes,
27 of them you were able to come up with a match, is that fair to say?
yes, I did.
Let's talk about those 27 shell casings. You compared those 27 shell casings to each other.
Correct.
So you compared the 27 as a group, just like you have here, with the comparison microscope and the hairline, looking for those specific fingerprint from them, right?
Correct.
What did you find as it relates to those 27 shell casings that were found in the defendant's basement?
I determined that the 27 cartridge cases were identified as being fired by the same firearm.
I'm going to go back a titch because I think he says 54. And again, this is part of the problem with taking tweets off of Twitter to come with when we don't have the video. I mean, it's a good synopsis, but that's why it's really important to pay attention, because I think he says 54, which 27 times 2 is 54. That's weird, or a coincidence, or I don't know. Anyway, I just want to rewind just a smidge to see, because if I was the prosecuting or defense attorney, so the gun was not, just want to go back here a minute.
The firearm I examined was not the firearm used for for an identification. Yes, correct.
The shell casing that recovered at the scene, is that right? Like the shell casing and compare it just like you have here.
Yes.
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting.
Okay, let's hear that again. The firearm.
And compare it just like you have here.
Yes.
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting.
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting.
You basically fire that firearm, collect the bullet, like the shell casing, and compare it just like you have here.
Yes.
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting the bullet or the shell casing that recovered at the scene. Is that right?
The firearm I examined.
So the firearm that was found at his house was excluded from firing the shell casings found at the scene. She says yes.
And was not the firearm used for for an identification. Yes, correct.
Now, you were also given 54 shell casings that were recovered in the defendant's basement.
So they recovered 54 shell casings, but then they only examined half of those.
I did have additional cartridge cases, yes.
And there were 54, is that right?
Yes.
27 of them you were able to come up with a match, is that fair to say?
Yes, I did.
Let's talk about those 27 shell casings. You compared those 27 shell casings
Again, the closed captioning is off.
to each other.
Correct.
So you compared the 27 as a group, just like you have here, with the comparison microscope and the hairline, looking for those specific fingerprints from them, right?
Correct.
What did you find as it relates to those 27 shell casings that were found in the defendant's basement?
I determined that the 27 cartridge cases were identified as being fired by the same firearm.
So those 27 shell casings that you recovered were all fired by the same
By a
firearm.
single firearm, yes.
By one firearm, those 27 all fired by one single intact firearm.
Correct.
Did you compare those 27 shell casings that we just talked about that were recovered in the defendant's basement on March 1st, 2023, to the 8 shell casings that were found around the body of Becky Bliefnick on February 23rd, 2023?
I did a comparison of those, yes.
Next slide. And here we're looking at one of the photographs from that comparison.
Yes,
So we have item 1 on the left, that's one of the 8 shell casings that were found around Becky's body.
that's correct.
And item 32-1 on the right, that was one of the shell casings that was found in the defendant's basement, correct?
That was a part of the 54 cartridge cases, yes.
And again, magnification 40 times, index black dot at 6 o'clock. You've explained to us that's just so you can orientate those shell casings to the same position.
Correct.
And again, did you move that hairline across the face of the shell casing?
The 2 items, yes.
We have 189. And again, that just shows that hairline moved to a different location.
Correct.
And after examining the 27 shell casings and the 8 shell casing and comparing them together, using your 26 years of experience and the testing and training that you received in those 26 years where you passed every time and score 100%, what can you tell us about the 27 shell casings found in the defendant's basement and the 8 shell casings found around Becky's body?
The findings are that I determined the 8 cartridge cases in items 1 through 8, and then 27 of those 54 cartridge cases were identified as being fired by the same single firearm.
One firearm fired the 27 shell casings in the basement and the 8 around Becky's body.
Correct.
The same firearm fired all those shell casings.
Okay, I think out of that word salad, they determined that the firearm that was found at his house did not match the shell casings found around Becky's body. 8 of the shell casings surrounding Becky's body and 27 of the 54 shell casings in the defendant's basement did match, but they did not match the firearm recovered. So that means the firearm is missing.
That was my findings.
I hate it when they do word salads like that to get to their point. This isn't freaking Matlock.
Crossman Schnuck.
Yes, thank you. Ma'am, I have some questions for you this morning, okay? Bear with me. If you don't understand my question, just let me know. I ask bad questions a lot. So let's get into it. So in your particular line of work, when you're comparing projectiles or shell casings, you use a really sophisticated microscope, correct?
Yes.
And your findings are not based on something that a computer program told us or that a specific algorithm told you, correct?
That's correct.
This is based off of what you see under your microscope, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so
based on my training and experience.
absolutely.
Yes.
So in an area, in a field like yours, where there's human interpretation, it's also subject to human error. Is that a fair statement?
It is a subjective, opinion-based science.
So two people can look at under the same microscope and have two differing opinions. Is that fair?
Someone could have a different opinion.
All right. So, and in your testimony with Mr. Jones, when you are doing these comparisons, I believe that you said that you look for similarities because there is no exact reproduction when a bullet is fired out of a gun. Is that fair?
Yes.
So you look for similarities and you look for consistency.
I also wanted to interject. I think I heard this from Ian Runkle. So Ian Runkle, if you're watching, I do pay attention to what you say. But I believe he has said that because the manufacturing of firearms has become such, over the years, has become so, streamlined, that similar guns have similar patterns on the shell casings, such that this whole examining shell casings coming from a specific gun is kind of junk science. So Ian Runkle, correct me if I am incorrect in stating that. I think that's kind of like this summary of what he has mentioned, that this is kind of junk science.
You're looking for that overall pattern to reproduce. It's not a line counting situation. It's not that we have a number of points that we have to look for an identification. There's no minimum amount required. It is truly just the pattern of the spatial relationship of those elements, the depth, the width, the height, that we're looking at, realizing that these are three-dimensional objects that we're looking at.
And when you did your specific comparisons in this case, you compared the 8 shell casings that were found at the crime scene against each other, correct?
Yes.
So you compared 1 to 2 and 1 to 3 and 1 to 4 and so on and so forth?
It can vary. Typically, we have a standard, and I might have that either item 1 or item 2 was used as a standard. Sometimes I will use a couple. So it's not that every time I'm going to use the same one because, again, what it is looking for that reproduction between those two items.
So in this case, and I'm looking at agency items 3 through 10, which would be lab items 1 through 8, which would be the 9mm Luger fired cartridge cases, okay?
Yes.
Were all 8 of those compared against each other individually?
Yes.
Okay. And then were each of those 8 cartridge cases compared against all of the cartridge cases that were submitted to you from Tim's house individually?
No.
Okay. So did you take specific cartridge cases from items 1 through 8 and then compare them to random items with respect to items 32-1 through 32-54?
Yes, because as it was explained before, I looked at 1 through 8 to each other determined they were fired by the same firearm. So now at this point, I have a single source among those 8. Then of the others, in the 27 that were identified to the same source, at that point then, all I need to do is take one from the one group and compare it to one from the other, because the findings of those 2 groups independently had already been determined.
So is it entirely possible that there would be similarities in item 6 that may not be found in item 3210?
I don't know that I understand your question.
Sure. So you did not compare all 8 casings to all 27 casings, correct? Once you determined that those 8 casings were a match, then you took one of those items and compared it against the 27, correct?
Correct.
And you did not take all 8 of those casings and compare each of those 8 casings to each of the 27 casings, correct?
Yeah, there was not a need to.
Okay. Is it possible?
Here's my question. Was she the one that determined that the 27? I think that's what she said earlier. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Possible that one of those items, 1 through 8, could have different similarities as a casing in items 1 through 27?
I don't know that, to me, different and similarities make sense together.
Okay. You stated earlier that you look for similarities and patterns, correct?
Yes, I'm looking for a pattern reproduction.
Okay, so you don't know if there is a difference in item 1 through 8 that may not have been identified in 1 through 27 because they were not all compared to each other.
But they were all identified to the same source.
I understand that, but 1 through 8 were not compared against, all of them were not compared against 1 through 27, fair?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
Okay. And when Mr. Jones was asking you about the type of gun that these could have been fired from, he asked you about a Luger and a CZ, but there were also several other types of firearms that could be included as firing this type, or making these types of marks, correct?
Having the same class characteristics.
You know, it could be a Browning.
Yes.
It could be a Beretta.
Yes.
Any other type of gun with similar rifling characteristics, correct?
Correct.
But you were not provided a weapon in this matter that you could say fired any of these bullets or shell casings, correct?
I did not make any identifications to the firearm that was provided.
Okay, and the only thing that you could tell us is potentially what type of firearm fired these, but not which exact gun, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you certainly can't tell us that the gun you were given was the one that shot these bullets and shell casings, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and when you're doing the land and groove comparisons, do you need to have the weapon that fired those in order to confirm the comparisons with respect to the projectiles?
No.
And is that the same with respect to the casings?
Yes.
And would the casings and the projectiles have the same types of markings, or would they be different?
Meaning in just how a bullet marks and a cartridge case, or between the two items?
Correct.
They will mark different because a bullet is actually traveling down the barrel, picking up marks as it moves from one end down to the muzzle end, where the cartridge case itself, is picking up an impressed mark. So when the bullet travels down the barrel, it's kind of the equal and opposite action reaction thing. The force that pushes the bullet down the barrel is also going to push the cartridge case rearward into the breech area of the firearm. So these marks are just going to get an impressed mark on them, an impressed fingerprint, as the state's attorney is using. So it's not going to be a striated mark as it travels from one end to the other. So they have different types of marks.
Okay, and so you look at a projectile differently than the way that you would look at a casing?
I look at it the same, doing a side-by-side comparison. It's just a different type of mark. It's a striation versus an impressed mark.
So what you're looking for is different, in a sense?
I'm still looking for a reproduction.
You're looking for a reproduction, but there wouldn't be an exact reproduction?
Correct.
Okay, and when you're looking for these reproductions and you're looking for these patterns, this is something that you're looking for and not a program or an algorithm?
That's correct.
Okay. No other questions, Judge?
Redirect.
Just a couple questions. Ma'am, after you do the testing and issue your opinion, there's a peer review process, correct?
Yes,
So your findings have to be confirmed by other people in the lab.
that's correct. Any identification that is, before an identification can be reported out, it has to be confirmed by another examiner.
And that was done in this case.
Yes,
Your identification that these groups of shell casings were fired by the exact same gun was confirmed by another examiner.
that was their opinion also, yes.
And in 26 years of testing, you've gotten everything right every time in those 26 years of testing, correct?
Objection.
That's what she testified to.
On the proficiency
That's what
test,
I'm saying. On the proficiency test, you got 100% every time for 26 years.
yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Stock?
No other questions, Judge?
All right, you may step down.
Okay.
And she's free to
Okay.
go.
Yes, Your
So
Honor.
that's the end of this afternoon. So again, Ian Runkle, if you are watching, I'm almost positive you're now one of my new followers. But am I correct in saying that because of the manufacturing process of firearms, the whole idea of a weapon leaving its own mark on a shell casing independent of that weapon is now considered junk science? So if you could just please comment below this video. And also, her testimony, like the audio completely dropped. I have stereo earphones in my ears. Well, maybe I only have one. But I had to kind of rely on her word down here. So there's that. So Ian Runkle, if you are watching right now, please post in the comment below while we watch this afternoon's testimony from yesterday in the Bliefnick trial. If her testimony is basically nowadays considered junk science because of the manufacturing process of firearms tends to leave the same marks on the shell casings. Therefore, you can't specifically state that one particular firearm left those markings on those shell casings. It could be the same firearm, like manufacturer style, but you can't drill it down to a specific firearm. Thank you. The Crime Spies audience appreciates your following and commenting. All right, let's just fast forward through this 4 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, one of my ears did fall out.
Counsel, step up.
I don't know. When the prosecution goes ahead and has that big giant word salad to get to like a Matlock moment,
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury,
that kind
we
of
still
falls
have
on
more
its
evidence
face.
to present, but because of the length of the next witness, then we are going to take lunch now. And what I'd ask is you'll have till 12:45.
Okay, let's just get rid of this guy now.
Okay, and if we get done with him, we'll have things to discuss outside the presence of the jury. So once you rest, then I will release the jury for the day. The state will rest. I will dismiss the jury.
Okay. So, and also for those of you, look, there's Ian Runkle right there on the screen. Can you see him? No, you can't. He's brilliant. That Ian Runkle is so smart. I find him delightfully quirky. Okay, and day 7 of the defense case is now going on. It's 9:33 my time. Okay, so we're just gonna let's hope the next case I cover, we're gonna confirm that the trial is actually going, like the video is going at the same time, because this is like creating so much extra work the way that this goes. In my opinion. I need to go to the grocery store because I went on Friday, and with my pain of my bad back, I forgot to get coffee. I did find some coffee beans in the cupboard, but they're not the most delicious. They must be stale. Did you know if you put a little pinch of baking soda in your coffee, it gets rid of the bitterness? That's not working. They were supposed to have this video cleaned up. I guess they do not.
We are on the record on 23 CF 170, People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr.
Just gonna
Bliefnick
leave
is
him
present
at
in
2
court,
times
along with
speed
his
until
attorney.
we
In this
get
case,
to
these nine
the.
people appear by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And ladies and gentlemen who are out in the audience, I would again remind you, you
Oh,
are allowed
him
to
and
have
his
cell
cell
phones in the courthouse.
phones.
However, while you are in the courtroom, those cell phones must be turned completely off and put away
Okay,
so
we
they
got
cannot
it.
be
We
seen.
got it. You
Devices
mention it
out
all the
so
time.
they
You
can
beat us
communicate
over the head
public,
with
but they
it.
need to wear the ID badges so that security proceeds.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then let's bring in the jury.
Okay, so there's only one witness this afternoon. This will be the last state's witness, and this is the guy I really want to listen to because his testimony lays out a timeline.
And then raise your right hand since you can't see the clerk. I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be
His
the truth, whole truth, and
testimony
nothing but the truth, so help you
lays
God? You
out
have a seat right over here.
a timeline, which I have
Come to
compiled.
the table to where you're comfortable. Bend the microphone in front of you, and then
Okay,
speak
let
towards
me
the
get it
microphone,
back
please.
down to normal
You may
voice.
inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you tell us your name, please?
Nick Eddy.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a detective with the Quincy Police Department.
How long have you done it?
I've been a detective for 5 years, been with the department for about 10.
Now, in that 10 years that you've been in the department, 5 years as a detective, have you received any?
So I've
training
taken
or
his testimony
Yes.
Can you
that he's going to provide,
So in my position, I received specialized training in
and then
visual evidence
I'm
area. So
in
I
the
deal a
process
lot
of
with
plugging in the
cell phone evidence
testimony
and being able
from
to,
the previous
read that type of
day
data
2,
when it
3,
comes in,
4,
or
and 5,
any other type of
4
electronic
days
data that we get through
into
courses
here
of
to see
investigation.
what I can
Fair to say
find.
you're the electronic nerd in the community?
Probably fair, yeah.
I want to talk to you first then about Becky's cell
Okay.
phone. Okay? We've heard evidence, and it's been introduced into evidence, the extraction from her cell phone. Did you get a chance as the detective who looks at that type of evidence to review the information from her cell phone?
Yes, I looked at it.
When you reviewed the information from her cell phone specifically, did you look at text messages?
Yes.
And in those text messages, did you review text messages between Becky and Ted Johnson?
Yes.
When you reviewed those text messages, at any point did you see any fights in text message between Becky and Ted?
No,
Any disagreements or arguments between Becky and Ted?
not that I can recall.
In reviewing the text messages on Becky's phone, did you see anyone that Becky had fights or disagreements with over text messages?
No.
Did you see any text messages where Becky said she was scared of anyone?
There were conversations she's had with other people that,
Apart from what we've already heard from other witnesses?
yes. Other than that, no.
I want to talk specifically then about February 23rd, 2023 in Becky's cell phone.
Okay.
On February 23rd, 2023, at 1:11 and 10 seconds, we've heard testimony and seen the evidence about a cell phone call to 91126, correct?
Yes.
After that 1:11 and 10 seconds in the morning, was there any other activity outgoing from Becky's cell phone?
No.
In your role as a detective in this case, were you also involved in the processing of the defendant's car? A search warrant was obtained for his car, and that car was searched, is that right?
Yes.
In that search, were there photographs taken of things that were found?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as People's Exhibits 166 through 170. If I can approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Can I ask you to look at these from 166 through 170? Tell me when you got a chance to look through them.
Okay.
Are those photographs that were taken on March 1st, 2023, when the defendant's car was searched?
It would have been March 2nd, but yes, those were photos. Yes.
And I apologize, March 2nd, when his car was searched?
Yes.
Do those photos accurately show what you observed when that car was searched?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that People's 166 through 170, I believe that's what I said, would be introduced into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Stock?
No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted, and you may publish them.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the screen now is People's Exhibit 166. Detective Eddie, what are we looking at here?
There's a pair of gloves on the dash.
Where the laser is pointed?
Yes.
And again, just as for the record, the area of the car, this is the defendant's car.
Yes.
And People's 167, please. Can you tell us where we're looking at here?
This would be underneath the driver's seat, the front driver's seat.
And you see a black pair of gloves and a white pair of gloves. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
People's 168. Would this be the black pair of gloves that were pulled out from underneath the driver's seat?
Yes.
And 169, the white pair of gloves that were pulled out from beneath the driver's seat?
Yes.
And in the back of the car, people's 170. What are we looking at here?
The rear compartment of the car where there's all these bags sitting there.
If I could approach a witness.
You may.
And you would have been marked as people's 222. Is that the only bag that was seized from the back of the plane?
Yes.
We'd ask that people 222 be introduced into evidence as well.
Any objection, Ms. Schnott?
No, Your Honor.
It will be admitted.
Detective Eddie, in your investigation, did you also receive or apply for and receive a search warrant for a phone app called Our Family Wizard?
Yes.
And specifically, was that search warrant for messages between Becky Bliefnick and the defendant on the Our Family Wizard app?
Yes.
If I can approach a witness.
You may.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as people's 165. Is that the business records affidavit from Our Family Wizard as well as a CD containing the information that you were requesting?
Yes.
And did you view that information?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that people's 165 be introduced into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Schnott?
No, Your Honor.
165 will be admitted.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you some photographs that are slides of the messages in 165. Ask you to review those.
Okay.
And are those, in fact, messages that you saw on the Our Family Wizard app, I believe on February 21st, 22nd of 2023, between Becky Bliefnick and the defendant?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask you to publish those. They've been introduced already under 165, and they're a subset of that information.
You may publish those.
The first slide, Detective, is on February 21st, 2023 at 7:46 p.m. It's a message from Becky Bliefnick to the defendant, and the subject is kids. Is that correct?
Yes.
The message is, are you able to keep the kids tomorrow? I do not feel good today and feeling worse as the night goes on. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was there a response to that message?
There was.
Next slide, please. And on February 21st, 2023 at 8:53 p.m., did the defendant send a message back to Becky Bliefnick, again with the subject kids?
Yes.
The message is, yes, I can keep them. I assume you're referring to overnight as well, unless something drastic changes tomorrow during the day with how you feel, correct?
Yes.
And did Becky respond to that?
Yes.
Next slide, please. And at 8:55 on the 21st, Becky sends the defendant a message, correct, overnight, so you would pick them up from school and keep them Wednesday overnight.
Yes.
Next slide, please. And then at 8:55 p.m., the defendant responds to Becky, yes, I can.
Yes.
And then at 8:56, Becky Bliefnick responds to Tim, to the defendant, okay, thanks.
Yes.
I want to move on now and talk to you about a bike that was found, okay?
Okay.
Are you familiar with the blue bike that was found?
Yes.
It was found approximately a half block from the defendant's residence, is that right?
Yes.
Were you involved in the handlebars of that bike being removed and sent for testing?
Yeah, I assisted in that.
They were tested only for DNA, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain to us the thought process behind it? They weren't tested for gunshot residue, they weren't tested for fingerprints. Explain that to me.
We felt that the likelihood for DNA was the greatest out of those options. It had been sitting out in the weather for 4 days essentially, so this was our, however small chance it was, this was the best chance we thought was to make.
I also want to talk to you about Ted Johnson. When was Ted Johnson interviewed?
The same evening, the 23rd of February.
In the evening?
Yes.
Later in the evening, 7, something around?
Yes, it was later.
And he was given a gunshot residue test, is that right?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me? Why was that done?
Just gathering as much information as we can, as much evidence as we can, because we don't, at that point, have an idea of exactly what is going on.
When you interviewed Mr. Johnson, did you have any idea about the possible time of death?
No.
In fact, until you got the report on the victim's phone, we didn't know that she tried to call 911 at 1:11 a.m.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson was interviewed way more than 6 hours after 1:11 a.m., is that right?
He was.
And in the course of your investigation, did you find any evidence that would lead you to believe that Mr. Johnson was a suspect in this homicide?
No.
I now want to talk about different surveillance videos. In the course of the investigation, was there a canvass done of the entire neighborhood to determine if there were any surveillance videos available?
Yes.
And in that canvass, were videos found?
Yes.
Can you tell me from what locations those videos were found?
20th in Hampshire, the bus barn, as we call it, or transportation office. Then the Napide videos, as we became to call them, at a residence on the 200 block South 20th Street, and then the house directly west of Becky's house.
Tell me how that happened, specifically with regard to the bus barn videos. How did you find all these different videos?
I had assistance from another officer who took time to basically review videos and see if there was anything out of place or abnormal with them.
And did you start with February 23rd?
Yes.
And when you started with February 23rd, did you see something unusual?
Yes.
Explain to me in a general sense what you saw on February 23rd that was unusual to you as a detective.
There was a person on a bike riding in the direction of Becky's residence in the middle of the night in February, which is odd.
Most people don't do bike rides in the middle of the night.
Correct.
Objection.
That will be overruled.
Most people don't do bike rides in the middle of the night.
Correct.
And most people don't ride the bike in the middle of February.
Correct.
After you found that bike ride on February 23rd, especially with the bus barn videos, did you then work backwards to determine if there were more videos that would be relevant?
Yes.
And when you did that, did you find more videos of a person riding a bike in the middle of the night in February?
Yes.
Then from there, you said you found a video at 224 South 20th, the Nappi video, as we've come to call it. And did you look to see if there were videos that would correlate with those other times?
We did.
And did you find some videos at the Nappi residence that correlated with the times for the Quincy bus stop?
Yes.
And as we've heard, there were video at Taylor Hyman, and did you look to see if that would correlate with the other videos?
Yes.
And did they all appear to correlate?
Yes.
Let's start then with February 14th, 2023, okay? There was video from the Quincy bus barn on the 14th at 2023, is that right?
Yes.
And that was approximately, you pull up that video. That was at approximately 12:29 a.m., is that right?
Yes.
Ms. Keck, if you could play that video. Now, Detective Eddie, to be fair, you can't, from that video, say who was riding that bike.
No. No.
Can't tell if it's a man or a woman.
No.
Can't tell if they're white or black.
No.
Can't tell if they're tall or short.
No.
Can't really say anything about it. Fair to say?
Yes.
After watching that video at 12:29 a.m., was there a video at the Nappi residence at 224 South 20th, nearly immediately after that, about a minute and a half later?
Yes.
Ms. Keck, if you could play that video, please. Hit pause for just a second, please. At the top of the screen, it says 2:14:23 at 1:31 a.m. We've already heard testimony that that was actually an hour off, and that the time was 12:31 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Keck, if you please hit play. Detective Eddie, person on the bike riding north on 20th and then turning east on Prairie, is that correct?
South on 20th and east on Prairie Avenue.
And then east on Prairie.
Yes.
After looking at that video, did you then go to a video from Taylor Hyman on the 14th as well?
Yes.
And Ms. Keck, if you could hit that video, and hit pause for just a minute. And that video's time was 12:37 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Detective Eddie, did you find more video on February 21st, 2023?
Yes.
Now, before we talk about that, on the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, and the 20th, were there any midnight bike rides?
No.
You watched from midnight to 4 or 5 a.m., no bike rides on any of those other days?
No.
Then let's talk about February 20. Oh, I apologize. There's one more video on the 14th. I forgot about that. There was another video at 12:52 at the Quincy Bus Park, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Becky, if you did one. You see a person on a bike headed north on 20th Street, correct?
Yes.
You shared with us no video on the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, or 20th?
Yes.
Was there video on the 21st?
Yes.
At 1 a.m., was there video from the Quincy Bus Barn?
Yes.
And what does that video show in a general sense?
Person on a bike riding south on 20th Street.
Ms. Beck, if you did play, please. After watching that video, was there video at the South 20th residence?
Yes.
And that video is at 1:01 a.m., is that right? About a minute and a half later.
Yes.
If you did play, please. And again, Detective Eddie, do you see that person on the bike? Go south on 20th and turn left or east on Parade.
Yes.
There is no video from the Hyman residence on that day.
No.
At 1:17 a.m., is there video at the bus barn again?
Yes.
And again, Detective Eddie, you see a person on a bike headed north on 20th Street.
Yes.
Then again, at 1:41 a.m., is there video from the bus barn?
Yes.
Ms. Beck, if you hit play. And approximately 15 minutes later, at 1:56 a.m., is there a bus barn video again?
Yes.
Showing a person on a bike headed north on 20th.
Yes.
On the 21st, are those the only videos of a person riding a bike by the Quincy bus barn?
Yes.
Let's then move on to the 22nd of February. At 12:57 a.m., do you once again see a person riding a bike south on 20th Street by the Quincy bus barn?
Yes.
approximately a minute and a half later at 12:59 a.m. is there video of a person riding south on 20th Street and then turning left or east on Prairie again?
Yes.
Okay. And on the 22nd at 1:05 a.m., approximately 5 or 6 minutes later, was there video from the Hyman residence?
Yes.
Let's check if you hit play. And approximately 5 minutes after that, at 1:10 a.m., is there video at the Quincy Bus Barn of a person headed north on 20th Street on the bike?
Yes.
Just check if you could hit play. Then about 30 minutes later, is there video from the bus barn at 1:46 of a person riding south on 20th?
Yes.
And approximately a minute and a half later at 1:48 a.m., is there video at that South 20th residence
Yes.
showing a person riding south on 20th and turning east on Prairie?
Yes.
Okay. And at approximately 1:53 a.m., 5 minutes later, was there video at Taylor Hyman's residence again?
Yes.
Okay. And approximately 15 minutes after that, is there video at the Quincy Bus Barn again of a person going north on 20?
Yes.
Let's move on to February 23rd, 2023. Are there video from the Quincy Bus Barn and 224 South 20th on the night, early morning hours of Becky's murder?
Yes.
At 12:55 a.m., is there video of a person riding a bike south on 20th by the bus barn?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that was the 22nd. 23rd at 12:55 a.m. Can you hit play, please? And Detective Eddie, approximately a minute and a half later at 12:57, was there video from 224 South 20th?
Yes.
Again, showing a person riding south on 20th Street and turning east on Prairie.
Yes.
Hit play, please. And at 1:16 a.m., is there video from the Quincy Bus Barn, again showing a person riding north on 20th Street?
Yes.
If you did. Detective Eddie, in the course of your investigation, was there a test bike ride that was done by another officer specifically, I believe it was Zach Davis, is that right?
Yes.
Did he do that at night as well?
He did.
And was there bus barn video of that ride as well?
Yes.
The bike that he used, did it have reflectors on the front and rear wheel?
Yes.
Did it have a front reflector on the bike as well?
Yes.
When you viewed the video from Zach Demus's ride, did you notice anything?
Yes.
What did you notice?
Those reflectors.
Your Honor, that's been introduced as part of the same Exhibit 162, and we'll be playing that next. Based on that video, did you draw any conclusions about the bike that we saw on the 14th, the 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd?
That it did not have those same reflectors.
I now want to move on and talk about the defendant's cell phone records. You've had a chance to review those, and they've been introduced into evidence. We'd ask permission to publish those again, Your Honor.
You may publish them.
Next slide, please. Next slide. On the 14th, when we see this person on the bike ride, is there any cell phone activity going on the defendant's phone? Are there any phone calls being made?
Mr. Jones, I'm going to stop you. Said on the 14th. Please state the month.
I apologize. On February 13th into February 14th, 2023, are there any phone calls going on the defendant's cell phone?
Within that time frame?
Within this time frame, correct?
No.
In fact, the last call on the 13th is 2/13/23 UTC time of 20:16:46. Did I read that right?
Yes.
So that would be 20 minus 6, so
2:16.
2:16 in the afternoon, correct?
Yes.
So from 2:16 in the afternoon on the 23rd, the 14th of February, until the 14th, I'm sorry, I misread that, I apologize, you go back. The 4th is UTC time.
Yes, they're in UTC.
The last time would be the 2/14/23 at 1:38:36 a.m., is that right? Because that would actually be the day before the 13th.
Yes.
So that would be, help me out with the math here, Dr. Eddie.
So we're looking at 1:36 on the 14th, so we subtract 6 hours, okay? And put me on the spot too.
Well, 1:38 in the afternoon, or 1:38 in the morning, minus 6, so 7.
Yes,
7:38 in the
7,
evening.
yes. I think that is 6.
7, you're looking at the wrong one, one line down.
Okay,
7:38 in the evening.
gotcha, yes.
And then the next call is the 14th at 7:32 UTC time, which is 1:32 in the morning.
Yes.
And on the 21st of 2023, you go forward, Ms. Kathy. The last phone call on the 21st, I think it's the next slide. Is at UTC time 2/21/23 at 22:37:54.
Yes.
That's UTC time. We have to subtract 6, so that would be 16:37 or 4:37 in the afternoon.
Yes.
And the next phone call on his phone is on the 22nd at 15:29 UTC time, which is 15 minus 6, 9:29 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
And then we'll go on to the 22nd and into the 23rd. And again, if you look at the bottom of the screen, the last phone call on the 22nd, it's line 122, is at 18:32 UTC time, which would be 12:32 Quincy time, correct?
Yes.
And the next call on his cell phone is not until 14:01 on the 23rd, which would be 8:01 in the morning.
Yes.
Next slide, please. Just a moment, Alan.
You may.
Let's then go to the defendant's laptop. You had a chance to review that as well?
Yes.
And the activity report on his laptop.
Yes.
You can pull that up, Ms. Kemp, that's been introduced in the middle of evidence. If we look at the screen, on the 13th of February at 2:02 in the afternoon, he does something on his mailbox, or the computer is doing something on the mailbox, and then there's nothing that is done until the 14th at 1:10 a.m., correct?
Yes.
There's no other activity on the laptop between 2:02 in the afternoon and 1:10 a.m. in the morning, correct?
Yes.
Then on the 21st, there is no activity on his computer from 2/21/23 at 20:27, that's 8:27 p.m. to the next morning, the 22nd, at 7:01 a.m. Correct?
Yes.
Then on the 22nd, and into the 23rd, there's no activity on his computer from the 22nd at 8:05, 8:15 p.m. to 6:02 a.m. on the 23rd. Is that right?
Yes.
When you were, did you have a chance to look at the defendant's cell phone?
Yes.
When you looked at his defendant's cell phone, was there information that you could glean about when that cell phone reports that the screen is locked or unlocked?
Yes.
And did you prepare a report based on that information about when his cell phone screen was locked and unlocked?
Yes.
Can I hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 162-1? Are these the slides that we prepared in connection with your testimony for this issue?
Yes.
We'd have to leave to publish. They've already been admitted. They're part of Exhibit 162.
You may publish them.
Detective Eddie, starting on February 21st, 2023, what time did the defendant's cell phone lock? The screen was locked and the phone wasn't being used.
So we're looking at the second line where it's locked at 004452 on the 21st.
And that's Quincy time, so that'd be 12:44 in the morning?
Yeah, so the -6 indicates that the adjustment has been made, so it's local time.
And it unlocks at what time?
It unlocks at 5:30 on the 21st.
And on the 22nd? His phone locks at what time?
His phone is locked on February 22nd, 2023 at 0050, which is 12:50 a.m.
And what time does it unlock?
It is unlocked at 1:15 a.m. on the 22nd.
And does it lock again?
Yes,
At what time?
it locks on February 22nd, 2023 at 1:39, that's a.m.
And what time does it unlock?
At 2:22 a.m. on the 22nd.
And on February 23rd? What time does his phone lock?
His phone is locked on the 23rd at 0038 or 12:38 a.m.
And what time does it unlock?
It is unlocked at 2:07 a.m.
Mr. Jones, I'm going to stop you for just a minute because we're all going to stand up and stretch, all right? Everybody's allowed to stand up and stretch.
When the search warrant was served, what's commonly referred to as a Whoop fitness bag.
Just want to interrupt for a moment. Court has been in session a little over an hour, according to Muddy Rivers News. Tim is wearing a dress shirt and tie under a brown pullover. Judge Adrian asked to see counsel in chambers. Tim is not testifying. Judge asked him if he understands his right. He says, yes, Your Honor. Closing arguments are starting actually right now. What time is it? 10:12. Started about 3 minutes ago. Then Judge Adrian goes over jury instructions in front of counsel. No exhibits or evidence will go with jury unless they ask for them. Jury seated. Many of them chose to wear black. Read into that what you will, says Muddy Rivers News. Schnack tells the jury she will not be presenting evidence. Adrian reminds the jury that they still hear closing arguments and instructions. So the defense has no witnesses and no evidence today. So yesterday, the state finished with this witness. Then this morning, the defense is like, we don't have any witnesses and we don't have any evidence. So then they took a break and Jones began his closing about 5 minutes ago ish.
Yes.
And did you receive information from that Whoop fitness bag?
Yes.
Your Honor, that's been admitted to evidence previously, and I'd ask permission to use that information.
You may publish excerpts of that information.
Okay.
If we get to the first slide, please. Detective Eddie, People's 156, what are we looking at here?
The Whoop fitness strap that was collected from the defendant.
And is there a specific serial number or item number that's associated with that Whoop armband?
Our evidence number is item number 110.
I'm talking about with regard to the item itself, the serial number for that item.
Yeah, there's an ID number for the device. It's in the lower right-hand photo of 4A05420044.
And is that the item number that was used in requesting a search warrant for information for that specific Whoop fitness armband?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Again, the defendant was wearing that on March 1st when when the search warrants were executed. Is that right?
Yes.
For the record, we have 157. If we go to the next slide, 158. And when you got that information from Whoop, First, can you tell me, was there information about the user?
Yes, there's account information that they provided.
And are we, the account information here on the left where it says first name Tim, last name Bliefnick, country US, city Quincy, Illinois, is that right?
Yes,
And there's also a email account, timbliefnick@gmail.com.
yes.
The information that you got, let's talk about the information that you got. First of all, when you got that information, how many lines of data did you receive?
So in the metric data set alone was 1,474,818 lines of data.
Get the first slide. Is this basically what we're looking at, that metric data that you're talking about?
Yes,
And it's got a strap ID number that we just talked about, 4A0542044, correct?
yes,
And there's a date, February 13, 2023, correct?
yes.
And there's a time. What can you tell me about the time?
So each line was represented in this timestamp, and they would go up estimate of a second, but it would, if you did the math, it's less than a second.
Is this time Central Standard Time or UTC time?
It is in UTC time.
So to get to Quincy time, we would have to subtract it.
Do that math, yes.
The Whoop armband, do you know how it charges?
It uses a battery pack that would slip on to the device as you wear it, so you do not have to remove the device to charge it, so it can charge with that battery pack on your wrist.
Also, when you got the information from Whoop, is there any GPS data that's included with it?
They did not provide any GPS data,
The Whoop doesn't have GPS capability.
none that they provided.
And you reviewed all 1,474,818 lines of data, as you talked about, second for second, that it's providing information, correct?
Yes.
And how does that work? The Whoop provides information to the phone, and the phone uploads it to the cloud?
So there's a Bluetooth connection that's established between the device and whatever phone it's paired with, and then that information is relayed to Whoop via the internet through a cloud connection.
Now, when you got this information, you already had all the videos, correct?
Yes,
And did you look at the Whoop data, the second for second, to determine if there was any correlation between the Whoop data and the videos that you already got?
yes,
And were there?
there were.
Let's talk about those correlations. First, on February 14th, 2023, was there a period of time when there was a change in that second for second connection to the phone?
Yes,
So if we look at this data, this is on February 14th, 2023, same strap ID number, right?
yes,
And it starts at 6:00:20 seconds, but as we know, you have to subtract 6, so that's midnight in 20 seconds.
yes,
Then we have midnight in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then it changes.
yes.
There's a gap of,
I just want to mention that the testimony of the boyfriend, Ted Johnson, said he arrived at Becky's house around midnight and left around 5 a.m. the 13th. Now, you can't arrive at midnight the 13th and stay for 5 hours. So I'm assuming he meant to say the 14th. So this testimony right here, so right around midnight, Ted is arriving at Becky's, but then this testimony is Tim's activity, like right around the same time. So how would Tim know that Ted was there?
1 hour, 10 minutes, and 10 seconds. Is that right?
Yes,
Help me out. It stops connecting to the phone at basically midnight, fair to say?
yes,
And on the 14th, it reconnects at 1:10 a.m. Is that right?
yes.
Well, what about on the 21st? Was there another gap in time?
Yes,
Next slide, please. And on February 21st, 2021, it stops connecting to the phone at 12:45 a.m., correct?
yes,
And then it starts,
I'm going to interrupt again because on February 21st, at an unspecified time, Ted Johnson saw Becky approximately 1 hour. He mentioned bringing food to her house on February 21st. During that visit, he stayed for an hour, carried bottles of water and books upstairs to her bedroom, kissed her on the forehead, and bid her goodnight, unaware it would be the last time he saw her. I don't know what time that was, though. They didn't say. I'm just pointing this out.
Reconnecting to the phone at 8:11 UTC time, which would be 2:11. Correct?
Yes.
What about on the 22nd? Were there in fact 2 gaps in time?
Yes.
Next slide, please. The whoop disconnects or stops relaying information to the phone at 6:42 UTC time, which would be 12:42 a.m., correct?
Yes.
And it reconnects to the phone at 1:16 a.m.
Yes.
Is there another gap right after that?
There is.
Next slide. Again, 7, 39, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And at 7:39:28, it stops connecting to the phone, right?
Yes.
That would be 1:39 a.m. Quincy time, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And it reconnects to the phone at 18:19 Quincy time, which would be 2:19 a.m.
Yes.
And on the 23rd.
Wait, did he just say 1819 UTC time?
Yes.
That would be 2 in the afternoon, wouldn't it?
Midnight, 36 minutes and 43 seconds, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. And at 12:36 a.m., it stops connecting to the phone.
Yes.
And at 2:01 a.m., it starts reconnecting to the phone, correct?
Yes.
You look through all 1,474,818 lines of data. On the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, are there any significant gaps?
Not during that time frame.
On the 24th, the 25th, the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, are there any significant gaps in that same time frame?
No.
I got just a moment, Your Honor? You may.
I'm gonna have to listen to that again.
Thank you, Detective Eddie. That's all the questions I have.
Cross, Ms. Schnapp.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Detective, while it's all fresh in our minds, I'm going to start talking about this WHOOP stuff, okay?
Okay.
Have you ever worked for the WHOOP company?
No.
Have you ever received any specialized training in how the WHOOP device works?
No.
Have you ever received any specialized training with how to interpret the WHOOP data?
No.
As far as what we are looking at is concerned, do you know how the WHOOP tracker is different from other fitness trackers?
Just for my own research that I've read upon it.
Okay. Is there anything proprietary about the WHOOP device that is different from other devices?
I don't know.
They have their own proprietary algorithm, correct?
I would imagine they do.
Okay, but you're not aware of what that algorithm is or what it means or anything in that regard, correct?
Correct.
As far as how you charge a WHOOP is concerned, you said that there's a battery pack on it's a wristband, correct?
Yes.
And is it rubber? Is it a cloth material? What kind of material is it?
The band itself.
Okay, and then there's a battery pack on it, correct?
I mean, are you asking
The
what
band itself.
is what's it made of?
Yes.
I do not know.
Okay, and then, but it's a strap.
Yes.
And then there's a battery pack on the strap, is that correct?
There's a battery pack you can place over the strap. Yes.
Okay, and that is what keeps the tracker going while it's on your wrist and not charging and connected to a wall, correct?
Is it can do charging while it's on your wrist.
And you can also remove it and connect it into a wall and do wall charging, correct?
The strap itself,
The battery
the
pack.
battery, that's how
Yes.
you would charge the battery.
Yes,
Is
and
to
you
plug
can,
it in.
and you can remove that battery from the strap, correct?
Yes.
And you can plug it into a wall and you can charge it that way,
The
correct?
battery pack,
Yes.
yes, that's how I would imagine it would happen.
Sure, so you don't have to have it on your wrist to charge it, correct?
You do not have to have the battery pack on your wrist to charge the battery.
Thank you, okay. Do you know, does the Whoop track data even if you aren't wearing it?
There's a certain amount of data that the strap will retain, according to the information that I gleaned from my research, that will stay on the strap. And then once it connects to the app, it will upload to Whoop.
Okay, and as far as the actual strap is concerned, that data that strap collects is then transmitted via Bluetooth to the phone that it's connected with.
To the phone's application, yes.
Okay, so then there's an app that you download with this fitness tracker,
To pair
correct?
with it, yes.
And that would be on a phone or a tablet or any place else you could put this kind of app, correct?
Yes.
All right, and the fitness tracker will sync with the app, correct?
Yes,
And that's done through Bluetooth, correct?
yes.
So if there's no Bluetooth connection, the data can't sync, is that correct?
That would be my assumption,
Okay,
yes.
and so even though the data may not be there on the application, once you sync it, it would show up, is that fair?
It's fair to say that.
Okay, and then do you know with this particular fitness tracker, can you also manually input data that the tracker may not have collected?
I do not know that.
Okay. Before you got the data off of the Whoop device, did you make sure that it was properly synced to make sure all of the data was collected off of that tracker?
I don't understand the question. Are we making sure that Whoop or Whoop strap is connected to the phone?
Yes.
That I don't know.
Okay. Do you know if there would be any gaps in Bluetooth connectivity during the times that you're talking about?
I don't know.
Okay. So if it's not connected to Bluetooth, it's not transmitting the data, correct?
If you're referring to the metrics database that we're
Yes.
looking at,
Yes.
then that would be my assumption based on what we saw.
Okay. And then if there's a disruption in the Bluetooth, if you sync it after the fact, is it your understanding that then that should fill in whatever gaps that there were during that time?
Again, I don't know how that metrics database works. That data set is unique to me on this situation, so I couldn't tell you how it's going to backfill and catch up that data.
Okay. Did you do any follow-up extractions to see if there was any back-end data in this case?
On the device?
On any device that you found?
No.
Okay. So the device that you have, or the information that you have is the information that you were able to extract and make sense
The
out of?
information we had came directly from Whoop.
Okay. And then you interpreted the data, correct?
Yes.
This wasn't somebody that Whoop came and explained this to you or said, this is what this means and this is what that means, correct?
We were given, within that data set that we were provided by Whoop, they gave us a brief explanation of the data within that information.
Okay. And in reference to People's Exhibits 161, the only thing that you can say with any certainty during these time periods is that the Whoop tracker was not connecting to the phone that it was attached to.
Say that one more time.
Sure. So you referenced some gaps in here.
Okay.
So for example, in People's 161-1, you said that there was a gap at 12:42 between 12:42 and 1:16 on February 22nd, 2023.
Okay.
So is that gap simply the Whoop tracker not connecting to the phone that it is registered to?
I mean, if you're asking me for my opinion, I can tell you, I don't know what exactly is happening, but I can tell you what I believe is happening.
Well, if you don't know what's happening, I don't want you to guess.
Okay,
So if you
I don't know
you
what,
don't
I don't know
Okay,
what is happening.
that's fair. I appreciate
Okay.
your honesty, Detective. Excuse me, moving on. You talked about searching Tim's car.
Yes,
Were you there for the search of Tim's car?
I was.
And during that search, he was cooperative and he actually told you and other officers where certain things were that you were looking for, correct?
I wasn't at the scene when that vehicle was collected,
Okay.
but I was there when we searched the vehicle the next day.
Okay. And were there swabs taken from the inside of his vehicle for further testing?
We did collect swabs.
And what did you guys take swabs of, if you recall?
I don't recall exactly what all we took swabs of.
Would you have swabbed the steering wheel?
Usually we do.
And
yes.
was that for things like DNA and gunshot residue?
It would have been for DNA,
Okay. And you also found a pair of gloves in Tim's car that day that it was processed, correct?
3 sets of gloves.
Okay.
yes.
And were those gloves sent off to the lab for
I don't
testing?
believe we sent those off, no.
Okay. Did you check the size of any of those gloves to see if they were adult or child size gloves?
I didn't check the size, but just by looking at them, they were adult sizes.
Okay. But you didn't check to confirm, correct?
Correct.
As far as other searches that are concerned, you and other detectives also searched certain items of Ted Johnson's, correct?
Yes,
Including his gun safe, correct?
yes,
And was there a bag with Becky's name found in that gun safe?
there was.
And did it have just over $13,000 in cash in that bag?
Yes,
As far as the messages are concerned between Tim and Becky on Our Family Wizard that you previously testified to, they were not arguing about picking up the kids, correct?
no,
There was no disagreements about Tim taking the kids, correct?
no,
Nobody was mad at each other because there was a last minute scheduling change that week, correct?
correct.
And there were no threats in those messages, correct?
No,
Two people making arrangements for their kids, correct?
yes.
As far as the bike is concerned, the blue bike that we've been talking a lot about, when was the first time that you personally saw that bike?
The date we collected it, that date escapes me right now, but it was whenever Inspector Hollensteiner found it.
Okay. Do you know the whereabouts of that bike the day before you saw that?
The whereabouts of the bike before I saw it?
Yeah.
No,
So when you told Mr. Jones that that bike had been outside for 4 days, you don't know that that bike had been outside for 4 days, correct?
the time span from when we found it to the time of Becky's murder was 4 days.
But you don't know where that bike was in the previous 4 days, correct?
No,
You don't know if it was kept inside or outside, correct?
no.
Ms. Stock, I'm going to stop you. If I could have counsel approach, please.
The judge likes his stretch breaks.
Ms. Schnock, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you. Detective, I'm going to re-ask this so that we can all get back on track here, but you don't know where that bike had been for the previous 4 days prior to finding it, where you found it on the day that it was found, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you also talked about the videos, and we saw the videos that were played today, and some of them were even played last week. We don't know if the bike that's played in that video is the same bike that Quincy Police found behind that garage, correct?
correct.
And as far as the videos are concerned, did you request any videos from the bus barn before February 14th of 2023?
I believe we had the 13th available to us.
Okay. Did you ask for anything before February 13th of 2023?
I believe we did, but they were purged or no longer there by the time we got back that far.
Okay, and then what was the latest date that you requested?
The 13th, February 13th, I
February.
believe is all we got. back
So
to.
what were the dates that you requested video from the bus barn?
All the dates that we could get from, as far as they could go back to the 13th till the 28th is when we got the
So,
last one.
so they searched from February 13th to February 28th, correct?
Yes,
Between the hours of midnight and 4 o'clock,
I believe
correct?
so, yes.
There were no requests made for any video before February 13th, correct?
We asked to go back as far as we could, so the 13th was as far back as they would go.
Okay, and so there's no viable video before February 13th?
That's what I was made aware of.
And then the last date that you would have requested viable video would have been February 28th, correct?
Yes.
And were there any requests made outside of the hours of midnight to 4 o'clock?
For our purposes of our review,
Yes.
no.
Okay. As far as the canvassing of the neighborhoods is concerned, did you have any personal responsibility with going door to door and looking and asking for video?
On the evening of, I did a quick survey of houses in that area.
Okay, and how many houses did you do a quick survey of that evening?
I don't know, half dozen or more.
Okay. Was there anybody that you had to follow up with after that evening with respect to video?
I did not.
Okay. How many officers working under you did you have going door to door canvassing
There was
neighborhoods?
at least 2 officers that did a lot of the canvassing.
Do you know how many hours those officers spent going door to door and canvassing?
I do not.
Do you know how many doors they knocked on canvassing?
I do not.
Do you know if they followed up with anybody that they had failed to make contact with previously?
I'm sure they did, but I didn't ask that question.
And as far as the video is concerned, in these videos that we're looking at off of 20th Street and by the bus barn, just by looking at those videos, we can't say that that's the same person in each video, correct?
Yes.
And we can't say where that person is coming from, correct?
Yes.
And we can't say where they're going, correct?
Yes.
As far as the phone activity that you previously testified to in People's Exhibit 164, that purely just tells us what calls are coming in and coming out, correct?
Are you referring to the AT&T records? Is that
Yes.
164? Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't tell us data activity that may be going on, correct?
In that exhibit, no.
Okay, so when you say that there's no activity on certain dates at certain times, it doesn't mean that there's no activity, it just means that there's no calls made during that time, correct?
Yes.
All right, and then the same thing with the laptop. You talked about the laptop and you referred to People's 162.2 and stated that there was no activity during certain days and certain times. People's 162.2 is not a comprehensive exhibit of all of the activity of that laptop, correct?
Correct. I believe it's labeled online activity.
Those are just searches that were done on Google, correct?
Online, I would say.
So it doesn't mean that there was no activity. It just means that there was no activity on Google at that time.
Online.
Okay, that's fair. That doesn't mean there wasn't activity someplace else.
Correct.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment.
You may.
Were you personally present for the search of Tim's house on Hampshire Street?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the area where the large crowbar was found that was seized and collected and sent off for testing?
I believe it was in the basement.
Were there other work items in the basement, like a workbench and miter saws and other tools that you would normally see together?
There were.
Okay. During the course of your investigation, did Quincy Police also search a pond and I think 3 waste lagoons at a trailer park outside of town?
Yes.
And nothing valuable was found there, correct?
No.
Also by that trailer park, there's about 20 acres of timber and woods, correct?
Yes.
Was that acreage searched?
To the best of our ability.
And nothing valuable was found there, correct?
Yes.
There was also trash that Quincy Police looked through, correct?
Yes.
Not only Tim's personal trash at his house, but I think somewhere in upwards of just south of 800 tons of trash was also sifted through by Quincy Police, correct?
Yes.
And nothing valuable was found there either, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Just a couple questions. With regard to the screen lock activity report, the phone would show that it was locked from 12:44 a.m. on the 21st to 5:30 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Which would indicate that it wasn't being used during that period of time, correct?
Yes.
And on the 22nd, it was locked from 12:50 a.m. to 1:15 a.m., which would indicate the same, correct?
Yes.
And then from 1:39 a.m. to 2:22 a.m. on the 22nd, it would indicate the same, correct?
Yes.
And February 23rd, it was locked from 12:38 a.m. to 2:07 a.m., indicating it wasn't being used, correct?
Yes.
And with regard to the WHOOP data, the only gaps on the WHOOP on the 14th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd are when we see a person on the bike and on the video at the Bus Barn, Napa, and Hyman residence, correct?
Yes.
On the other days, when we don't see that, the 13th, the 15th, the 18th, the 19th, the 13th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, the 20th, and all the time after the 23rd, there's not a gap, is there?
No.
That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Knock, you want any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you.
All right, and is he free to leave?
Yes, Your Honor. That exception, the people would rest. All the evidence that we wanted admitted and published has been done.
All right. The court records also show that everything that was offered has been admitted or ruled on. So the people now rest. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because the people have rested, then there are several matters that we need to take up outside your presence. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you break for today. You'll need to be back tomorrow to make any decisions or reach what you may have seen or heard outside material. For example, judge, during the course, provide any prohibited
Okay, and then I think the next is, and I don't know if you have any interest in watching this, but it is what they did after the jury left the room. I mean, I guess we can start playing it and see what happens. I think this is just a back and forth about him testifying. Meanwhile, I am monitoring the closing arguments by the state. I don't know if this is boring, then we can maybe just cut it off. I really hope we get the closing argument video a lot faster today. I did notice Gisela. I don't know if you follow her, Grizzly True Crime. She's fantastic. She lives in the Netherlands. She's from South Africa. She used to be a pilot. Her life is just so extraordinary. I know she was vacationing in Florida the other day. But she's also, she made a comment on Muddy River News, thanking them for their play-by-play. I don't know.
Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney, Ms. Casey Schnock. People are present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. The jury is not present. And Ms. Schnock, you wish to make a motion?
Your Honor, I do, and just as a matter of record.
Okay, I'll just slow this down. I mean, I might as well just put it on here.
All right, you may be heard.
And I guess
Thank you.
if
May it please
it's
the court,
boring, then...
Counsel, at this point, I would be asking for a directed verdict in light of the evidence or lack of evidence.
Okay, so this is before
Over
she...
the course of the last week. In order to sustain a guilty verdict, our jurors are going to have to believe that Tim left a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, and 5-year-old home alone, got on a bike, rode his bike from 1641 Hampshire to 24th and Kentucky Road, murdered Becky, and rode back home. That theory is not supported by the evidence. If you look at the video that Quincy police were able to recover, there is no identification on those videos. Definitely no positive identification with respect to Tim. It has been testified to ad nauseum that we don't know anything about this person on the video. We don't know their age, we don't know their race, we don't know their gender, we don't know where they're coming from, we don't know where they're going to. We don't even know that this is the same person on each one of these videos, and that hasn't been disputed. I think every single person that has been questioned about that agrees you cannot identify the individual on that video. Secondly, was with respect to the bike. The bike handlebars were removed. They were sent off to the crime lab for testing, and there is nothing that the crime lab was able to recover from those bike handlebars to tie those to Tim. Furthermore, that bike was found behind a garage on 18th Street. It was never found at Tim's house. It was never found in Tim's possession. It was never found in Becky's possession or at Becky's house either. This appears to be a random bike that was abandoned or left outside of a garage on 18th Street that has no associations to Tim Bliefnick. Certainly no associations that could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty. Next.
That's another thing. So this bike, so he did buy a bike on Facebook Marketplace. There was also another bike on Facebook Marketplace, I think a Schwinn. So I believe he bought a Mongoose. And then there's another one, a Schwinn. Now I forget which is which. I guess we'll have to look back. But is there any evidence that this particular bike that they see in the video, I mean, can they even tell? But from what I saw, the Schwinn looks like a mountain bike and the Mongoose looks like a BMX bike. So you'd think you'd be able to establish, you know, what kind of bike is it? Is it like a BMX bike like the Mongoose? Or is it a mountain bike looking thing? Again, why do people have surveillance video cameras when they're so shitty you can't tell anything anyway? What's the point? But like the bike that was found that they confiscated, there's no DNA evidence on this bike. They don't even know if the bike was related to the crime other than someone in the middle of the night driving around. I mean, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to think critically about this.
we have the pry bar, or the crowbar, and the multi-tool. Those were testified to. The multi-tool was excluded completely. The crowbar was inconclusive. Inconclusive lab results are not proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Tim committed this crime. It is simply evidence that nobody can say one way or another whether that crowbar was used during the commission of that crime. That crowbar, as I have said, inconclusive at best, but certainly nothing that links Tim to using that crowbar to open that window. You certainly can't see a crowbar in any of those videos. Next, you have the shoe print that was left out right by the window that the people have alluded was broken into and was used as at the point of entry. I believe no less than 6 pairs of Tim's shoes were taken for comparison purposes. There were pictures taken of Tim's shoe, of Ted Johnson's shoe for comparison purposes, and the 1 pair of shoes that were sent to the crime lab for testing specifically excluded Tim as part of that testing. Those were not Tim's shoes that made that footprint, and he was excluded as an individual that would have made those prints. Next, we have heard about all of the gloves that were taken from Tim's house and car and trash and other places. Those gloves were sent off to the crime lab for testing, and there's no blood, no DNA, no nothing that links those gloves to this crime or any other crime for that matter. So the gloves don't prove anything. Next, we get to the shell casings. There's no DNA that connects those casings to Tim. There's no fingerprints that connects those casings to Tim, and they do not have a gun that fired those casings. And then we have the divorce talk, the hearsay statements. Most of those were 2 years old. At least one witness testified that those were joking conversations, that anything that Becky said regarding her being scared of Tim was said in jest.
I also want to remark that those statements were made like right around the time that they were getting divorced. So, you know, like I've mentioned, things were ugly, but now we're really good friends. And it sounds like he wasn't feeling good a couple nights before she was murdered and asked if they could swap, you know, arrangements. And it sounds like things were amicable.
And were girls blowing off steam at work. Nothing threatening. None of these, what I will call hearsay witnesses, were able to provide any information as to why this would have been said or what the fear was or when the fear was instilled. None of these witnesses did anything to prevent anything from happening other than just listening. Becky went out of her way to tell all of these people almost the same exact statement over and over and over and over again, but we didn't hear any evidence from her own attorney, Jerry Timmerwilke, that she was scared of Tim and needed protection from Tim. That was the one person in all of this that had access to the courts, and he didn't have anything in front of him to do anything with that. And then we have the Aldi bags, which the crime lab expert was here today and said that he was not able to make any match at all and that any analysis was precluded. So the theory that these Aldi bags were used as somewhat as a silencer is not supported by the evidence. Your Honor, if you look at this case as a whole, it sounds great. We have video, but you can't see who's in the video. We have a bike, but his DNA isn't on the bike. We have a footprint, but the footprint excludes Tim. So in light of all of the evidence, even if you take it as true in the most favorable way and in the most favorable light to the state, Your Honor, it is our request of the court that you find that the state has failed to meet their burden of proof. They have failed to establish a prima facie case in this matter, and that the only appropriate remedy is to grant the motion for a directed verdict at the close of the people's case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schnock.
Now, that's normal that they do that, the defense, when a state has rested. Pardon the lawnmower sounds if you can hear them. The lawnmower people are here, and they're usually here like 5 hours. So I apologize.
Your jump to Ms. Keck.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be relatively brief. I think the standard here, the court has to look at the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. And I think if the court looks at the evidence in that light, I think it's clear that we have enough evidence here for a reasonable jury to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed that offense and shot Becky Bliefnick 14 times while she lay on that cold bathroom floor. Your Honor, I think some things aren't covered. We certainly have to look at each piece of evidence, not as an individual piece of evidence, but as part of a whole. And I think if the court looks at the evidence as part of a whole, the court will see that we have the WHOOP data, the videos, the correlation between the two, We have the bike that, yes, it doesn't have the defendant's fingerprints or DNA on it, but it's on his phone. We have Mr. Blazing, who says he sold it to a tall, athletic, white individual. And we have all these pieces of evidence that as a whole paint a picture. And I think if the court looks at all those pieces of evidence, not as individual pieces, but as part of a whole, then it is clear that the motion for a director's verdict should be denied, and I would ask the court to so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Schnock, anything further?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
The court has considered the evidence and has considered the arguments of counsel. At this point, this is a motion for directed verdict at the close of the people's evidence. In order to decide the case, the court has to determine whether or not the people have presented what's called a prima facie case. That is, they presented sufficient evidence on every issue that they need to prove whereby a jury could find the defendant guilty. The court must look at the evidence in a light most favorable to the people. Taking all that into consideration, the people have presented a prima facie case, and the court would deny the defendant's motion for directed verdict at the close of the people's case. And then, having denied that motion, then we are now ready to proceed to the defendant's case. And Ms. Schnock, has your client made a decision whether or not he is going to testify?
Not a firm decision yet, Your Honor, no.
Okay. Mr. Bliefnick, you have a right to remain silent. Whether you testify or not is your decision alone. You can certainly consider the advice given by counsel, but in the end, whether or not you testify is your decision. Do you understand that? I do. Okay. And then, Ms. Schnock, have you determined whether or not you are going to present any evidence tomorrow?
I have.
Okay, are you going to present evidence tomorrow?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then what we will need to do is the jury comes in tomorrow, you will make your final decision. Then before the jury comes in, I'm going to ask whether or not your client has decided whether or not to testify. If he's decided not to testify, then we will be finished with all the evidence. And then at that point, then the court will take a little recess, or a partial recess, so everybody can collect their thoughts and make final.
Well, and again, Your Honor, again, if the defendant chooses to testify,
Then we might have rebuttal.
you're gonna have
We might have rebuttal, that's right. But if the defendant decides not to testify, then we are finished with the evidence, and the court will take a break at that point, and we will go into final arguments then tomorrow morning, all right? If the defendant does testify, or if the defendant makes a decision to present some other evidence, then we'll just have to play it by ear, all right? So that will be the procedure today, and then we need to kind of discuss have kind of a preliminary jury instruction conference. And is there anything we need to bring up on the record then before we do that, Mr. Jones?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then I'm going to excuse the court reporter, and because this is all off the record. And then any problem with doing this out here, or do you want to go someplace else to have that preliminary?
Just another thing while I'm thinking about it. Okay, this is again why, in my opinion, as an accountant, avid crime watcher, but I am an accountant and a mother of 4 children, triplets and a son. When the state puts charges against someone, it needs to be solid. Same thing with Murdaugh. Murdaugh, the state charges were murder, gun in the hand, committing both crimes. This case, gun in his hand, committing the crimes. Now, we've got the video evidence. We have the whoop connecting and not connecting conveniently at certain times. Could this have been, same thing with Murdaugh. If there was a conspiracy to commit murder charge, I might have bitten it. Same thing with this one. If there's a conspiracy to commit the murder of Becky, I might bite on that because of the whoop, connecting, disconnecting, the figure on the bike, etc. That to me is a conspiracy. It's not putting the gun in his hand. That's my opinion. So now you have it.
Preliminary jury instruction conference.
Judge, I'll leave that up to Ms. Schnock. I will tell the court, people's position is that we've gone through these instructions. I don't think there's anything that's going to be super argumentative. I also think I know we have to do the formal instruction on the record and in public, but I also think based on the publicity of this case, there's no harm in doing the informal conference off the record, but in open court. I think transparency.
I'm having this at 2 times speed because
I just assumed.
you can't even hear it. I'm just reading it. I mean, you can sort of hear it.
Stay around. We do not need the court reporter. All right. All right. Thank you. Mr. Jones, did you happen to bring my copy of? All right, then I'm just going to go through these preliminary instructions. The one instruction I know that we
Now,
don't
these are just going over jury
have
instructions
is
to make sure that
instructions or
they
matters in the courtroom.
agree.
Is that in there? Did I miss that? Okay. All right. Then first instruction is 101, the functions of the court and jury. Anybody have any problem with that?
No.
It's not okay. 101A is preliminary cautionary instructions. The court's already given that, but any problem with that?
No.
The court doesn't plan on reading that instruction again.
It shouldn't, Your Honor.
101B is implicit bias. Any problem with that?
Nope.
1.02, jury is the sole judges of the believability of the witnesses. And the first one is with the defendant testifying. The second one is without the defendant testifying. Any objection to that instruction when we choose the appropriate one?
No,
Ms. Hawk?
no,
Okay.
Your Honor.
1.03 is arguments of counsel. Any problem with that?
No,
1.05 is jury note-taking. Oh,
no problem.
there it is. All right. Then we have 1.09A, which is extended media coverage.
Judge, just, I know we're not on the record, but when we do the formal jury instruction, I'll note that this is actually a civil instruction, it's not a criminal instruction. I think that's important to note in the formal instruction.
Right, but the Supreme Court rule says I have to, supposed to give that instruction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
It's just not a criminal instruction, so maybe
Right.
the Supreme Court should fix that.
Yeah. Ms. Schnock, any problem with that?
No problem with that, Your Honor.
And then 1.09B,
No problem with that, Your Honor.
all right, and that's when the media was present in any portion of the trial. 2.01, the charge against the defendant.
No problem.
Then 28.01,
That's fine.
enhancement, extended term.
That's appropriate.
Okay, and no objection to the court giving that what's out of order in the IPI, but in order as to giving it right after the instruction as far as the charge goes. Ms. Schnock?
That's fine.
Okay, I think that's appropriate. That's the way you're supposed to, they tell us we're supposed to do it. 2.02, the information against the charging document, not evidence, and has the indictment in there. Any problem with that?
No,
2.03, presumption of innocence.
that's good.
And then 28.02, the enhancement presumption of innocence. Any objections?
No objection.
Okay, and then again, the court will give that, the enhancement again, right after the presumption of innocence unless you've got an objection, Ms. Schnock.
No,
Okay, then 2.04, failure of the defendant to testify, then that would be your instruction if he decides not to testify.
yes,
3.01, date of the offense charged. Any problem with that, Ms. Schnock?
no,
3.02, definition of circumstantial evidence.
no objection.
3.06 to 3.07, statements by the defendant.
Judge, that's going to only relate to the statements of Shannon Pilkington and Amanda Keck, so I think we have to include it because of that evidence.
All right, Ms. Schnock?
I mean, they were statements that he made. I don't know that they were necessarily related to the crime, but I think that probably goes more, but that is what it is.
I think we need to give that because there was evidence about statements made by the defendant. Then 3.11, prior inconsistent statements.
Judge, we'll withdraw that. I don't think there were any prior inconsistent statements, which might be the first time in my career we've had a case with no prior inconsistent statements.
Ms. Schnock?
I agree there. I can't think of any that came up.
I can't either. I can't think of any either.
And believe me, we were keeping track of it. And
All right, so people aren't offering it, defendant's not offering it, so I'll just take that out. And if one of you want to change your mind and put it back in there, then we'll do that at the formal instruction conference. Then we've got 7.01B, definition of first-degree murder.
no objection.
7.02B, issues in first-degree murder.
No objection.
11.53, definition of home invasion.
No objection.
11.53C, definition of dwelling place of another.
No objection.
I don't have any problem with giving that, but is there an actual issue with that?
Yes, Your Honor, because, and again, I think we're getting hyper-technical, but to be fair, that's who Laura and I are. In home invasion, in this case, the defendant maintained a tenancy interest in the home in question on Kentucky Street. However, there was a court order barring him from entering that. So that would be, so that if there's a question from the jury that, well, how could he commit a home invasion when
On his
he,
own
on his own home?
Right,
Well, the
yeah.
answer is because there was a
Okay.
court order, which is what this instruction deals with.
Because there's an order for exclusive possession.
Correct.
Right? Okay,
Yes.
all right. 11.54, issues in home invasion.
No objection.
2803, issues in enhancement, extended term factor.
No objection.
All right, and again, that will be given right after the issues. Then we have 2601, the concluding instructions.
No objection.
And then 2804, the enhancement concluding instruction.
No objection.
And then we've got the jury verdicts, not guilty of home invasion,
Looks good. No objection.
guilty of home invasion,
No objection.
not guilty of first-degree murder,
No objection.
guilty of first-degree murder,
No objection.
not guilty of first-degree murder with discharge of a firearm,
That's just the allegation that he personally discharged the
Right.
firearm. Yeah.
No objection.
and then 2806, which is the guilty of first-degree murder with the discharge of a firearm.
No objection.
All right, any other jury instructions, Mr. Jones, that you believe we might need?
I don't think so, Your Honor.
Ms. Schnock?
No.
This is like the fewest jury instructions I think
Don't
we've
say
ever
that,
had for a first-degree murder.
Judge, don't jinx us. We're
Thanks,
not there.
Kevin.
Okay, all right. Okay, then what we're going to do, what I'd like to do is be here tomorrow, 8:45-ish, and then before we bring the jury in, figure out what you're going to do, Ms. Schnock, and then we'll bring the jury in and we can let them know then. Any problem with that? All right, we'll be in recess.
Sorry, I just responded to Gisela on Grizzly True Crime. She's awesome. She's the one I was telling you about that lives in the Netherlands. I believe she's now vacationing in Florida. She's from South Africa, former pilot. Isn't that interesting? What she said, I told her I'm so curious your thoughts, and she said, been sharing lots of summaries and thoughts on live streams, which I haven't had a chance to listen to because I've been in bed because of my back. I hope the shell casings, Google searches, and bicycle he bought are evidence for the jury. Anxious about this one. And then I just responded, I'm not sure. I'm not 100%, but I believe the brilliant Ian Runkle, who I'm sure watches my show, has said that due to the refinement of firearms manufacturing, the theory that each gun leaves unique markings on shell casings is, quote, junk science, unquote. And then I just put, if the state charges were conspiracy, they'd have a stronger case, imho. And that I'm also anxious. So let me just see where we're at with the... So it's 11:02 my time, which is the same, we're Central Time, same as the court. And I just wanted to read with you I'm wondering if he's done. The last tweet was 30. Oh, here. Okay, so I just want to compare with my notes before I read. Please hold. Surgery. Okay, so here's where it picks up. Give me a second, please. Need some hold music. You can listen to the lawnmower, people. The neighbor that used to live next door to me, every time the lawnmower people would come, I'd say, "Who am I?" She moved right before fall last year. I don't know why it takes them 1,000 years to mow the grass. They start up the street, go down, there's a dead end, and then there's like an upper cul-de-sac. And it just takes them 1,000 years to cut the grass. Like, why can't you just do like a section, and then another section, and then another section, and then another section? And heaven forbid you leave your car outside in the driveway. I got chips in my windshield one time. My daughter, I had to take I had to go pick up the girls from school. This was like 2 years ago. The triplets. And one of my daughters was in tennis. So I pick them up, bring them home, and I left the car outside thinking that they were done because they'd already been here half the day. And we had to wait a little while before I had to take her to tennis. So all of a sudden they came back for a final, I guess. It must have been with their blower thing. And I think I was in the garage because it was like we were getting ready for, I don't know, I think I was getting my Halloween stuff in order. I believe, something like that. But I'd left the car out in the driveway thinking, well, why put it in the garage when I have to leave anyway to take her to tennis? So, yes, I know. I was in the garage. And so they come by, and I'm thinking, oh, well, this can't be too bad. And there was like, it's an aluminum garage door. There's like shit hitting the aluminum garage door. And I guess I didn't think much of it because, like, why would they have their little thing and then have, like, rocks and stuff coming up on the car? Like, you'd think you'd avoid the car. So then I go to take her to tennis, and I'm halfway to tennis, and I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, my God, there's a chip in my windshield. And then I come home and inspect it. There was, like, 6 chips in my windshield that obviously weren't there because I would have seen it when I picked them up after school. When the car was in the garage. The car was only outside for a very short period of time, maybe an hour. And the only thing that happened in the driveway was them coming by. So then I notified the association, and the asshole that was in charge of the association basically said, well, how do we know that that didn't happen with something else? And then he said, did you mention it to them? And I'm like, no, because by the time I took her to tennis, they were already gone. Well, how do we know that that this didn't happen in another fashion? Unbelievable. So I took pictures and I thought, well, this is basically pointless. So anyway, I told all my neighbors, make sure when the lawn people are here that you put your car in the garage because they chipped up and I had just gotten done clay barring the whole car, like getting ready for winter. You wash it and then you take clay bar and then get like every little scratch out of it before you wax it and put it in for the winter. So the car was like totally perfect. Again, I would have noticed there was chips. That was like the week before. Okay, so let's just go over this. Let's see if I can summarize what his basic thing is here. Hold on a second. I gotta go to the pharmacy and pick up my prescriptions are finally done. No, I haven't done my hair yet either. Did you ever see that episode of Friends where they were in like Jamaica or something? And Monica's hair just got bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what's happening. Let's see if we can get a summary here. Maybe not. Okay, I guess that's going to have to wait for later. Okay, so what I'm going to do is end this live stream for now. Again, we watched yesterday's final testimony of the state's witnesses. And today, right now, for about the last hour or so, they're doing closing arguments, the state. This morning, the defense said they would not call any witnesses, nor have any evidence. Tim is not going to be testifying. So for now, I'm going to end this broadcast and then go pick up my prescriptions. And then I will wait patiently for Muddy Rivers News to see how quickly they can turn around this video. Alrighty? And then we'll be on jury watch. So for now, I bid you adieu. And I did tell my book club audience that I will put on another chapter of Art of the Deal because I could only do 2 short chapters this morning. So I'll do that before I go pick up my prescriptions. Okay, see you later. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If you enjoyed the content, please hit that like button. Share this video on your social media. Subscribe to our channel. Turn on those important notifications. Follow us on Twitter. This channel is new, so that means we work for free. Any support is most appreciated through Rumble Rants, Venmo, or Buy Me a Coffee. All links are in the description box below. I look forward to your next visit to Crime Spies. Thanks again so much and have a blessed day.